The day I became a joke, the sky over the starter altar was burning gold. Thousands of new players stood under the floating ruins of Altara, staring at weapons that were supposed to decide the rest of our lives. Swords hovered inside pillars of light, staffs spun with thunder at their tips. Beast eggs beat like hearts inside crystal nests. Armor sets stood upright without bodies inside them, shining like they already knew they were legendary. And then there was me, standing at the back with dust on my shoes, an empty inventory, and the kind of face people forgot before I even finished introducing myself. The altar asked each of us to choose one starter relic. Only one. No trades, no second chances, no crying later because you picked something shiny and useless. The guy near the front grabbed a greatsword, and the air cracked like a storm had been trapped inside the blade. A girl took a phoenix egg, and it breathed sparks into her hand. Another player selected a staff that made 3 glowing circles spin behind his head. Garrett, the loudest guy at the altar, and already acting like he owned the place, chose a red lightning spear that wrapped itself around his arm like a living dragon. He turned around, lifted it for everyone to see, and smiled like he had just won the world. I kept walking past the famous weapons. Past the swords. Past the staffs. Past the armor. Past the eggs that chirped, hissed, and growled from their crystal nests. At the very end of the altar, almost hidden behind a cracked stone step, I found a small silver ring sitting in a plain bowl. No glow. No lightning. No dragon roar. No angel chorus. It looked like something a poor blacksmith would make for practice, then throw away because even practice deserved better. When I picked it up, a thin line of blue text appeared above my palm. Plain silver ring. No attack power. No defense power. Unknown function. The entire altar went quiet for one beautiful second. Then everyone laughed. It started with a few snickers, then became a wave. People were bent over. Someone actually dropped their helmet because they were laughing too hard. Garrett leaned on his spear and wiped a fake tear from his eye. He said I had chosen jewelry for my funeral. I smiled because I had no better option, and because when people laugh at you, they stop watching carefully. That was their first mistake. I slipped the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. The altar lights dimmed. The chosen relics locked themselves to their owners. Everyone began testing attacks, summoning fireballs, slashing the air, bragging about rankings that did not exist yet. I stepped away from the crowd, crouched beside the cracked altar path, and picked up a copper coin someone had dropped. It was worthless, 1 copper, barely enough to buy stale bread. But when my ring touched it, the coin trembled. For a moment, I thought nothing happened. Then the coin clicked. Another coin slid out of its edge like a second moon, coming loose from the first. 2 coins rested in my palm. Same scratches. Same weight. Same ugly little king stamped on the front. I stared at them. The ring had no attack power. It had something much worse. Possibility. I touched the 2 coins together. Click. 4. I touched 4. Click. 8. The copies sparked at the edges, like they were made from lightning pretending to be metal. After a few seconds, one of them twitched, hissed, and melted into silver mist. So the copies were unstable. Fine. Unstable did not mean useless. Unstable meant I needed timing. I shoved the coins into my pouch before anyone noticed, then walked toward the starter gate while the heroes were still flexing with their legendary toys. Garrett saw me pass and laughed again. He told me to be careful not to scratch my precious ring. I told him not to point his spear at the sky during a storm. He frowned because he did not understand whether that was an insult or advice. It was both. The first field outside the altar was filled with needle rabbits, red slimes, and wolves the size of kitchen tables. New players charged forward, swinging huge weapons they barely knew how to hold. Fireballs exploded in trees. Beast eggs rolled downhill. Someone screamed because their armor was too heavy and they had fallen face first into mud. I had a ring that duplicated copper and no weapon. So I found a dead branch, broke it into pieces, and touched 1 splinter. Click. 2 splinters. 4. 8. 16. The ring warmed on my finger every time I used it, and the copied splinters sparked harder each round. At 32, the first few began to pop like firecrackers. That was my limit for rough wood. Good to know. A needle rabbit jumped at my throat. I threw 32 splinters into the air and slapped them with my palm. Half of them duplicated mid-flight. The rabbit did not meet 1 weapon. It met a wooden storm. Splinters rained down, bounced off the dirt, stuck into the monster's fur, and scared it so badly it tripped over its own ears. I grabbed a stone and finished it before it could recover. Was it elegant? No. Was it powerful? Also no. Was it funny watching a monster get bullied by a pile of toothpicks? Absolutely. A glowing tooth dropped from the rabbit's mouth. I touched it. Click. 2 monster teeth. The copies lasted 10 seconds before turning into mist. I touched them again. 4. Again. 8. The teeth were sharper than the splinters, and when I threw them, they whistled. By sunset, I had invented my first attack. Pocket shrapnel. It was not on any skill list. It did not glow. It did not come with a dramatic name from the altar. It was just me duplicating junk and throwing it fast enough that monsters learned fear from trash. While everyone else practiced heroic poses, I cleared weak monsters by turning pebbles into gravel clouds, rabbit teeth into bone hail, and slime drops into bouncing puddles that made enemies slip like drunk ducks on soap. The ring had rules. Everything I duplicated came out slightly unstable. Small objects lasted longer. Simple objects copied better. Anything with magic inside it hissed, cracked, or tried to explode. Living things refused to duplicate, which was probably good, because the world did not need 2 Garretts. The bigger the object, the hotter the ring became. The more magical the object, the shorter the copy lasted. But I realized something important before the first night even fell. People looked at weapons and asked what damage they could do. I looked at objects and asked how many problems they could become. That made me dangerous. Starter Town was called Flintgate, a safe zone built around a giant crystal that pushed monsters away. The crystal glowed pale blue, and everyone treated it like a holy monument. I treated it like a clue. If the world had safe zone crystals, then protection could be copied. Not yet. The ring would probably cook my finger off if I tried. But someday. For now, I needed money, food, and someone who understood crafting better than I did. That was how I met Owen. He was a thin blacksmith with burned sleeves, tired eyes, and the calm expression of a man who had watched too many idiots test fire weapons indoors. His shop was wedged between a potion stall and a place that sold grilled monster legs on sticks. I brought him 6 unstable duplicated nails, a handful of monster teeth, and a copper coin that kept twitching like it wanted to escape reality. Owen looked at my palm for 1 second and told me to stop before I blew up his counter. That was the first time all day someone did not laugh at the ring. He asked what it did. I told him it doubled things. He stared at me. Then he locked the shop door. Owen was not a hero. He did not care about rankings or glory. He cared about materials, heat, pressure, and whether fools could be convinced not to touch glowing metal with wet hands. He tested one of my copied nails by dropping it into a bowl of blue dust. The nail stopped sparking and lasted 2 minutes instead of 10 seconds. That was the second rule I learned. Duplicates could be stabilized. Not forever, but long enough. Owen called it binding. A little monster ash, a little heat, a little pressure, and the duplicate stopped acting like lightning wearing a costume. It became solid enough to craft with. The catch was simple. If the binding failed, the object could burst. A coin popped like a firecracker. A nail shot into the ceiling. A slime drop expanded into a clear jelly bubble that swallowed Owen's hammer and refused to let go until he stabbed it with a fork. Owen looked at the bubble, then at me, and said we were either going to become rich or die in the stupidest way possible. I told him those were not separate options. He smiled for the first time. That night, while the legendary weapon users celebrated their first kills, I sat in a smoky workshop duplicating nails, arrowheads, seeds, and potion drops. Owen taught me how different materials behaved. Metal copies lasted longer when quenched in cold water. Plant copies needed moonlight. Monster parts got angry if duplicated too many times and sometimes snapped at fingers even after the monster was dead. That last part was not a joke. A duplicated wolf fang bit my thumb. I respected it after that. By morning, I had my first real weapon. A wrist sling with a rotating pouch. Not legendary, not beautiful. But it let me fire duplicated objects fast enough that I could turn one arrowhead into a shotgun blast. When I walked back into the field, Garrett was there with a small crowd around him. He had already reached a higher level than most starters and had started collecting followers by acting confident enough that nervous people mistook it for leadership. He saw my sling and laughed so loudly birds flew out of a tree. He called it a child's toy. I did not answer. A pack of thorn wolves came over the ridge before I had to. Garrett spun his red spear, lightning crawling along its edge. His followers cheered. He lunged and pierced one wolf clean through, which was impressive until the other 6 rushed him from the sides. He was strong. He was also obvious. I touched one iron nail in my pouch. 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. The ring heated. I loaded the sling and fired at the dirt in front of the wolves. Nails hit the ground, duplicated on impact because I touched the sling cord at the exact moment they left and became a glittering field of spikes. The wolves hit at full speed. 6 monsters went from terrifying predators to screaming pincushions in half a heartbeat. Garrett stared at the spike field. His followers stopped cheering for him and started looking at me. I walked past them, collected the wolf fangs, and touched one. Click. The fang became 2. I looked Garrett in the eye while the duplicate hissed with unstable silver sparks. Then I said, still no attack power. Nobody laughed that time. That was the beginning of the climb. Not because people respected me. They did not. They just upgraded their insults. Now they called me a cheater, a gimmick user, a walking money trick, a weakling hiding behind junk. They said a real fight would expose me. They said my ring was useful for chores and nothing else. They said I could not duel, I could not face bosses, I could not survive deep dungeons, I could not stand beside legendary relic users. Every time someone said I could not do something, I added it to my list. Then I found a way to do it with a coin, a tooth, and terrible timing. The first dungeon opened 3 days later. It rose from the grasslands at dawn, a black stone arch with blue fire burning inside. The entrance smelled like wet iron and old rain. Everyone in town rushed toward it because first clear rewards could change everything. Garrett gathered the biggest party. Serena arrived with the flashiest one. She was already famous by then. She had chosen a flame staff from the altar, and she wore white dueling clothes trimmed with red thread. Wherever she walked, sparks drifted around her like fireflies. She smiled softly, spoke gently, and looked like she had stepped out of a holy painting. That was why most people did not notice the way she watched other people's gear. I noticed. Peoples who loved power looked at power with hunger. Serena looked at my ring like it was a locked treasure chest. She asked if I wanted to join her team. I said no. Her smile did not move, but the sparks around her burned a little hotter. Garrett shouted that nobody needed a ring clown slowing them down. He charged into the dungeon first. Serena followed with her party. Dozens of players went after them. I waited until the entrance quieted. Owen stood beside me with a backpack full of stabilizing dust, cheap arrow shafts, bound nails, and 3 emergency potions that were mostly potion and only partly experimental disaster. He asked if I was sure about going alone. I told him I was not going alone. Then I held up one nail. Owen sighed and said he hated that answer. Inside the dungeon, the walls were covered in glowing moss and the floor was cracked by old traps. The first room had swinging blades. Most parties dealt with it by timing the swings or blocking them with shields. I tossed a pebble. The first blade sliced it in half. I touched another pebble and doubled it, then doubled it again, then scattered a handful across the floor. The traps reacted to every impact. Blades swung, darts fired, stone mouths spat acid. The hallway wasted half its hidden attacks on rocks that cost me nothing. Then I walked through while the traps reset. Simple. A few rooms later, I found the first treasure chest already opened and emptied by Garrett's party. They had left a broken copper key in the lock because the dungeon key had snapped. Everyone else would have cursed and moved on. I touched the broken key. Click. 2 broken keys. The copy was unstable, but the shape was complete enough for Owen's powder to hold it for a minute. I melted the broken ends together with a fire slime drop, cooled it with a duplicated frost pebble, and created a rough key that fit the next sealed door. That was when the dungeon stopped being a hallway and became a buffet. Locked supply rooms. Secret gates. Hidden puzzle boxes. Every key the early parties used once, I could copy from the scratches it left behind. Every broken mechanism became spare parts. Every monster drop became a stack of monster drops if I acted before the sparks faded. In one chamber, a swarm of bone bats dropped from the ceiling. Their wings were thin as knives, and their shrieks made my teeth vibrate. I should have run. Instead, I duplicated a handful of seeds. Not magic seeds. Just bitter vine seeds Owen had given me in case we needed emergency rope. I threw them into puddles of dungeon water, touched 1 drop of green growth potion, and doubled it until the air smelled like crushed leaves. The potion copies were unstable and already swelling. Perfect. I splashed them across the seeds. Vines exploded out of the floor. Not grew. Exploded. They shot upward in thick green ropes, twisting around pillars, wrapping bats, slapping walls, and knocking me flat on my back. The chamber became a jungle in 3 seconds. Bone bats shrieked, tangled, and hung upside down like ugly fruit. One vine grabbed my ankle too. I apologized to it. It did not care. I cut myself free with a duplicated fang and walked under a ceiling full of trapped monsters while they screamed at me with tiny skull faces. That was my second attack. Illegal gardening. By the time I reached the middle floor, I had cleared more rooms than most full parties, not by being stronger, by making the dungeon waste its strength on copies, traps, plants, and explosions it never expected. Then I heard shouting. Garrett's party had reached a stone bridge over a pit of black water. On the far side stood a gate with 3 keyholes. They had 1 key. Serena's party had another. The 3rd key was missing. Both groups were arguing. The bridge was too narrow for a fight, but pride does not care about architecture. Garrett accused Serena of hiding the 3rd key. Serena accused Garrett of being too stupid to count to 3. I walked up behind them holding the broken key I had copied earlier. Everyone turned. The laughter tried to come back, but it had lost confidence. Garrett demanded to know how I got there. I told him I walked. Serena's eyes went straight to my hand. She asked if that was the 3rd key. It was not. It was a copy of a repaired broken key, held together by dust, heat, luck, and disrespect for natural law. But it looked enough like a key for greedy people to make mistakes. I held it up. The unstable sparks were hidden under my fingers. I said I could open the gate, but I wanted the first look at whatever was inside. Garrett said I was insane. Serena said that sounded fair, which meant she planned to betray me after the door opened. Good. Predictable people were easy to weaponize. The 3 keys went into the gate. Garrett turned his. Serena turned hers. I turned mine. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then my copied key screamed. Not metaphorically. The key made a high metal shriek, burst into silver sparks, and sprayed unstable energy into the lock. The gate did not open. It panicked. All 3 keyholes spun backward. The bridge folded in half. The black water below rose like a hungry mouth. Garrett cursed and jumped back. Serena blasted fire at the water. I had already moved. Before turning the key, I had thrown duplicated vine seeds into cracks along the bridge. When the gate's energy surged, the seeds drank it like rain. Vines erupted from both sides of the pit, weaving into a green net under my feet. The bridge collapsed. Everyone screamed. I landed on the vine net, bounced once, and nearly bit my tongue off. Garrett and Serena's parties fell around me in the most expensive rain I had ever seen. Their legendary weapons glowed, their armor flashed, their beast eggs cried. Nobody looked heroic while tangled upside down in vines over black water. I walked across the living net, reached the gate, and touched the lock directly. The ring burned. The lock duplicated. 1 lock stayed on the gate. The other appeared in my hand, still connected to the door's magic for half a breath. I crushed the duplicate with a stone. The original lock cracked in sympathy. The gate opened. That was the 3rd rule. Copied objects carried echoes. Damage the copy fast enough, and the original felt a whisper of it. Not enough to destroy a sword. Enough to jam a lock. Enough to crack a weak trap. Enough to turn the world into a prank with consequences. I stepped into the boss chamber first. The monster waiting inside was a stone boar covered in glowing cracks. It was the size of a wagon, with tusks like curved spears and a temper worse than Garrett's. It pawed the ground, snorted fire, and charged before I finished appreciating how dead I should have been. I dove behind a pillar. The boar smashed through it. Stone exploded, dust filled the air, my ring pulsed against my finger. I had copied coins, nails, seeds, keys, and teeth. Now I touched a fallen chunk of the pillar. Click. The copy appeared, but it was heavy, too heavy. The ring burned so hot my vision flashed white. The duplicate chunk lasted 1 second before collapsing into mist. 1 second was enough. I copied another chunk right above the boar's head. It dropped like a hammer. The boar stumbled. I did it again. And again. The ring screamed heat into my bones, and I screamed back because apparently that helped. Every time the boar charged, I touched rubble and doubled it above its path. The boss chamber became a construction accident with monster music. Garrett and Serena stumbled in with their parties just in time to see me standing on a broken pillar, raining rocks onto a boss with a ring everyone had called useless. Garrett shouted that I was stealing the kill. The boar turned toward his voice. I shrugged. The monster charged him. Garrett raised his spear, realized too late that standing dramatically in front of a wagon-sized boar was a terrible plan, and got launched into a wall so hard the wall apologized. Serena blasted fire into the boar's cracks, which actually helped. The cracks glowed brighter, the boss was weakening. But Serena was not aiming to help me. She was trying to time the final hit. I saw it in her eyes. She wanted the reward, she wanted the chest, she wanted to smile afterward and say teamwork while taking everything. So I gave her an opening. I stumbled. I made it look real. Boar lowered its head for one final charge. Serena lifted her staff, flames twisting into a spear of white fire. Garrett peeled himself off the wall and yelled something heroic but dented. I touched the boar's broken tusk as it scraped past me. Click. A duplicate tusk appeared in my hand, unstable and humming like a hornet nest. I threw it straight up. Then I touched a coin. 2 coins. 4, 8, 16. I snapped the coins into the air under the tusk, each one duplicating for half a second, forming a rising chain of tiny metal impacts. The tusk bounced from coin to coin, changing direction faster than any normal weapon could. Serena fired her white flame. Duplicate tusk redirected off the last coin and punched through the flame, turning into a burning spiral. It slammed into the boar's glowing crack right between the eyes. The boss froze. Then it shattered into a storm of stone, fire, and treasure light. The reward chest landed at my feet. Not Garrett's. Not Serena's. Mine. The chamber went silent, except for the sound of Garrett wheezing behind a rock. I opened the chest. Inside were coins, a rare herb, a boss core, and a skill scroll torn into 3 fragments. I did not touch the coins first. I touched the herb. It was called Moonfire Basil, a rare crafting plant that sold for more than everything I owned combined. The ring pulsed. The herb copied cleanly, but the duplicate wilted at the edges almost instantly. Owen's dust held it for 5 minutes. 5 minutes was an eternity. Then I touched the scroll fragment. The ring went cold. The fragment duplicated, but the copy was transparent, flickering, almost not there. I grabbed it with both hands and pressed it against the original. For 1 second, the missing words on the torn page lit up. I could not create a permanent skill scroll yet, but I could use duplicated fragments to read what was missing. That was better. Skills were knowledge. Knowledge did not vanish when the copy did. I walked out of that dungeon with half the treasure, a boss clear mark, and a new understanding of how badly the world had underestimated me. By the end of the week, everyone knew my name. Not with respect yet. Respect came later. First came rumors. They said I could turn 1 coin into a fortune. False, I could turn 1 coin into a short-lived pile of dangerous confetti. They said I had an army hidden in my ring. False, I had nails, seeds, teeth, and no fear of looking stupid. They said I had tricked the dungeon boss into killing itself. That one was close enough. Owen and I built a rhythm. I hunted materials. He tested stabilizers. I duplicated tiny things until my hands shook. He yelled when I pushed too far. I ignored him until something exploded. Then he yelled louder. He discovered that duplicated herbs could be brewed into potions if crushed before they destabilized. Duplicated arrows flew straight only if their feathers were original and their heads were copied. Duplicated monster teeth made excellent traps but terrible necklace charms because they sometimes bit the wearer. We discovered that copying liquid was insane. A single potion drop could become 2 drops, then 4, then 8, but liquid copies hated boundaries. At 64 drops, the potion did not stay in the cup. It became a bouncing red blob that ricocheted around the shop, healed Owen's burned sleeve, revived a dead houseplant, slapped me in the face, and escaped through the chimney. For 3 days, people in Flintgate reported a mysterious red jelly hopping across rooftops and healing pigeons. Owen blamed me. He was correct. But the potion experiment gave me my next trick. If I could not store unstable liquids, I could weaponize the moment they failed. So I filled glass beads with single drops of oil, acid, healing potion, frostwater, sleep syrup, and growth tonic. Then I duplicated the beads at the moment of impact. Monsters expected arrows. They did not expect exploding bead mathematics. A troll came at me in the eastern quarry, swinging a tree trunk and roaring loud enough to shake dust from the cliffs. Legendary weapon users had to fight trolls carefully because their skin hardened when struck. I did not strike the skin. I shot a bead of sleep syrup into its open mouth. Then I touched the bead with a duplicated arrowhead mid-flight. The bead became 2. The 2 became 4. 4 sleep beads shattered between the troll's teeth. The troll blinked, yawned, and fell asleep while still standing. Its tree trunk dropped onto its own foot. It woke up just long enough to look betrayed by reality. Then I duplicated frostwater under its legs, turned the ground slick, and let gravity do the damage. The troll slid downhill, crashed through 3 boulders, and landed in a pond with its rear sticking out. A crowd watched from the ridge. Garrett was there too. He had stopped laughing in public, but his face still looked like every compliment given to me personally injured him. After the troll fight, he blocked my pass. He said the ring belonged to someone who could use it properly. I asked if he knew anyone like that. His spear crackled. The crowd backed away. Garrett was not wearing giant armor. He did not need it. He was fast, sharp, and built like someone who believed every hallway was a runway. His red coat snapped behind him as he spun the lightning spear. Sparks cut lines into the dirt. He challenged me to a duel. I accepted because sometimes refusing a stupid fight makes the stupid person louder. Duel circle formed outside town. People gathered on walls, roofs, carts, and monster cages. Owen stood near the front with his arms crossed and the expression of a man already calculating repair costs. Garrett attacked first. His spear thrust was fast enough to leave red afterimages. I barely dodged. The heat grazed my cheek. He was stronger than me, faster than me, and better trained with an actual weapon. That was fine. I had not planned to fight him like a weapon user. I planned to fight him like a problem. He lunged again. I threw a coin. He sliced it in half. The 2 halves duplicated. 4 broken halves spun around his face. He flinched. I used that breath to fire a nail at his boot. He dodged and laughed. Then the nail copied itself on impact with the dirt. A tiny spike field bloomed under his landing foot. He twisted midair, impressive and annoying, then used his spear to vault over the spikes. So he could adapt. Good. That made the trap funnier. I threw 3 more coins, 2 teeth, and 1 bead of oil. Garrett cut through all of them with a spinning spear strike. The crowd cheered because it looked like he had destroyed my attack. He had actually done my job for me. Every sliced object became more edges. Every edge became a copy. Every copy sparked. The air around him filled with metal flashes, bone slivers, and oil droplets. Then I snapped my fingers against the ring. The duplicated oil droplets destabilized at once. A glittering cloud of slippery mist burst around Garrett. His next heroic step turned into a full-body betrayal. He slipped. Not a small slip. A legendary slip. His feet flew upward. His spear spun out of his hand. He rotated twice in the air, hit the ground on his back, slid across the dual circle, and crashed into a barrel of apples someone had been selling. Apples flew everywhere. I touched 1. Click. 2 apples. 4. 8. A rolling wave of apples flooded the circle. Garrett tried to stand, slipped on another apple, cursed, and disappeared under a red-green avalanche while the crowd lost its mind. I did not attack him while he was down. I walked over, picked up his spear, and held it out to him point first but harmless, the way you offer a broom to someone who made a mess. I told him the duel was over unless he wanted dessert. He looked at the apples, then at the crowd laughing, and his pride cracked louder than the dungeon gate. He surrendered. That victory changed everything. Not because I beat Garrett. Because I beat him without trying to look cool. That made it look even cooler. People started asking Owen for copied arrowheads. They wanted duplicated herbs, duplicated potion drops, duplicated trap kits. Owen told them no unless I approved it. I told most of them no because handing unstable materials to strangers sounded like building a festival out of fireworks and panic. Serena did not ask. She sent people to follow me. They were not subtle. When I hunted in the ash forest, shadows moved behind trees. When I bought empty vials, someone bought the same vials after me. When I visited Owen's shop at night, a face disappeared from the alley. I could have confronted them. Instead, I prepared a lesson. The ash forest was full of charcoal trees, ember moths, and black boars with burning tusks. It was also full of hollow logs that smoked from the inside. I placed a small pouch under one log. Inside it was a fake ring made from cheap silver, coated with a little of my mana so it felt magical from a distance. Around the pouch, I scattered duplicated coins, a copied Boscor shaving, and a few potion beads. Then I walked away loudly, pretending I had dropped something important. Greedy people hear accidents like dogs hear whistles. Two of Serena's followers crept out after I left. They grabbed the pouch. One of them opened it. The fake ring glowed because I had dusted it with unstable Moonfear basil powder. Then the coins started clicking. Not because they were copying. Because I had already copied them too many times, and their instability was reaching the funny part. The pouch exploded into silver mist, slippery oil, sleep syrup, and a sudden burst of vine seeds. By the time I returned, both spies were dangling upside down from a tree, wrapped in vines, snoring deeply while ember moths used them as warm lamps. I did not hurt them. I called Tessa. Tessa was one of Flintgate's wardens, the kind of person who could make a tavern quiet by stepping through the door. She carried a short baton carved from blue crystal, wore a dark coat instead of armor, and had eyes that treated excuses like insects. She had heard complaints about my explosions. Now she saw Serena's people hanging from a tree with stolen goods in their hands. I showed her the bait pouch, the fake ring, and the path of footprints. Tessa asked if I had intentionally set a trap. I said I had intentionally dropped something in a very educational place. She stared at me for a long time. Then she cut the spies down and took them to jail. That was the first time evil people attacked me and realized my weakest move was mercy. Because if I wanted them dead, they would not have woken up behind bars with vine leaves in their hair. Serena visited Owen's shop the next day. I was in the back room grinding monster teeth into powder when the bell rang. Owen's voice went flat, which meant trouble had arrived wearing perfume. Serena asked to buy my ring. Owen said it was not for sale. She offered gold. He said no. She offered rare materials. He said no. She offered protection. I stepped out and told her Owen was allergic to threats. Serena smiled at me, firelight curled around her staff like a tame snake. She said I misunderstood her. I told her I understood her perfectly. She did not want the ring because it was strong. She wanted it because it made other strong things multiply. For 1 second, the smile faded. There she was, the hunger underneath the holy painting. Then she said clever people should work together. I said clever people do not stand this close to shelves full of unstable copied acid beads. Her eyes flicked to the shelves. Owen slowly stepped behind a wall. Serena did not attack. She was smarter than Garrett. She left with her smile back in place, but the sparks around her burned black at the edges. After that, I knew the next fight would not be a duel. It would be a theft. So I made the ring harder to steal. Not with locks. Locks could be picked. Not with guards. Guards could be bribed or beaten. I made the ring dangerous to remove. Owen forged a thin underband of ironbark, ghost silver, and a thread of my own mana. It sat beneath the plain silver ring like a hidden jaw. If someone tried to pull the ring off without my will, the underband would duplicate inward for half a second. Not enough to cut my finger. Enough to clamp harder than a crab with anger issues. We tested it with a wooden finger. The wooden finger exploded. Owen said that was a success. I said we had different definitions of success. And he made me train until I could control the duplication pulse without panicking. That mattered because the ring was getting stronger. Or maybe I was learning how to stop treating it like a coin trick. At first, I had to touch objects directly. Then I learned touch could travel through connected material. If my finger touched a bowstring, I could copy an arrow at release. If my boot touched a chain, I could duplicate the hook at the end. If my palm touched a table, I could make every nail in the table twitch, though Owen banned me from practicing that indoors after the furniture incident. Do not ask about the furniture incident. Nobody was seriously hurt except the furniture, and it had been ugly anyway. The next dungeon was the glass ant nest. It opened under a dry lake, all glittering tunnels and transparent monsters with razor legs. Parties hated it because the ants swarmed in perfect lines, their bodies hard as crystal, and their jaws strong enough to bite through shields. I loved it because ants dropped glass mandibles. Small, sharp, easy to copy. Also, the dungeon had reflecting walls that confused people, but not because enemies copied anyone. The walls simply bent light like water. Players got lost chasing paths that were not there. I marked my route with duplicated chalk. Every 10 steps, one chalk line became 2, then 4, forming arrows on the floor before fading after 20 minutes. It was messy, bright, and impossible to miss. Garrett had recovered from the apple incident and entered the nest with a smaller group. He avoided looking at me. Progress. Serena entered too, but kept her distance. Not progress. A glass ant swarm hit us on the second floor. Hundreds of skittering legs scraped the tunnel. Their bodies reflected our faces in broken pieces. Players panicked because every fireball bounced weirdly. Blades glanced off, spears jammed in crystal shells. I stepped forward and touched one fallen mandible. 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. The ring warmed, but glass copied beautifully, like it wanted to become a problem. I loaded the mandibles into a sling pouch, spun once, and released. First wave flew low, bouncing off the glass floor. I touched the sling cord at release, and the blades doubled mid-flight, then again when they struck the wall. The tunnel turned into a blender made of math. Glass mandibles ricocheted everywhere, cutting legs, cracking shells, carving sparks from the walls. I ducked. Everyone else ducked after me, which was wise. The ants did not duck. When the storm ended, the swarm was scrap. People stared. I was getting used to that. Then the queen screamed. The entire nest shook. Floor split and a glass ant queen rose from below, as big as a house, with a belly full of glowing eggs. It fired crystal needles from its mouth in streams so dense they looked like rain turned sideways. A normal party would need shields. I had a better idea. I touched one crystal needle as it stabbed into the wall beside me. Click. 2 needles. The copy faced the same direction as the original. Interesting. I touched the wall. Every embedded needle connected through the glass surface trembled. The ring screamed heat into my arm. Too many. Way too many. So I did not copy all of them. I copied the first row. A sheet of duplicate needles burst out of the wall and shot backward along the path they had entered. The queen stabbed herself with her own attack. She roared. I laughed because sometimes combat was just returning bad mail. The queen slammed her legs down, shattering the floor under me. I fell into the egg chamber. Soft glowing eggs surrounded me, each one pulsing with unborn monsters. I could not duplicate living things, and eggs counted as 2 alive for the ring. Good, I did not want more ants. But between the eggs were crystals. Thousands of tiny growth crystals feeding the chamber. I grabbed one. Click. 2, 4, 8. The copies were unstable and bright. I threw them into the queen's open belly vents. Then I touched a bead of growth tonic. The crystals expanded inside the queen's own armor. Not plants this time. Crystal branches. They grew outward from cracks, jamming plates, locking legs, turning the queen into a chandelier having a bad day. She thrashed, slammed into the tunnel ceiling, and dropped more glass mandibles than I could carry. Garrett appeared on a ledge above, stunned. Serena appeared across from him, eyes burning. The queen prepared one final scream. I touched the biggest mandible and copied it. The duplicate was unstable, almost liquid with light. I jumped onto a crystal branch, ran up the queen's side, and stabbed the copied mandible into the crack where her head met her body. Then I duplicated the mandible while it was inside the crack. The blade became 2 inside a space built for 1. The queen's armor split. The boss exploded into glass rain. I landed badly, rolled through egg slime, and came up looking like a swamp creature wearing treasure sparks. Not elegant. Still effective. The reward this time was a glass queen core, a pouch of safe zone crystal dust, and another skill scroll fragment. The scroll fragment taught me a phrase. Echo chain. That was the ancient name for what I had discovered with the lock. A copy was not just a copy, it was a short-lived echo that remembered its source. If I understood the connection, I could make the echo carry force backward. Only a whisper now. But whispers could open gates. Whispers could break armor straps. Whispers could ruin very expensive boots. Garrett learned that last one when he stepped too close to my experiment later, and his left boot duplicated sideways. He walked in circles for an hour. I apologized. Eventually, Serena stopped pretending after the glass ant nest. She did not challenge me, she did not threaten Owen, she did not smile in the street. She vanished for 4 days. That worried me more than anything. While she was gone, I pushed the ring harder. The safe zone crystal dust became my obsession. It was not a full crystal, just powdered protection. When I touched one grain, it duplicated perfectly for 3 seconds, then faded. When Owen mixed the dust with melted glass mandibles, the result was a clear bead that projected a tiny shield bubble for one breath. One breath was enough to block an arrow. 2 beads made 2 breaths. 4 beads made 4. You see where this goes. Owen told me not to make too many because overlapping safe fields could shove each other apart violently. Naturally, I wanted to see what happened. We tested it outside town in an empty pit. I threw one shield bead into the center. A bubble formed the size of a barrel. I duplicated the bead. 2 bubbles pushed apart. 4 bubbles shoved harder. 8 bubbles bounced around the pit like invisible balls. 16 bubbles collided and launched Owen's test dummy into the clouds. The dummy came down 3 streets away wearing a cabbage cart. Owen banned shield bead tests within sight of vegetables. I named the technique Bubble Riot. It became one of my favorites. Next major challenge came from the Iron Orchard, a dungeon where trees grew metal fruit and monsters hid inside the branches. The fruit was valuable, but if picked wrong, it screamed and attracted steel apes. Yes, screaming fruit. Altara was beautiful and deeply unreasonable. Teams entered with axes and shields. Garrett entered with a new cloak and less confidence. I entered with Owen's backpack, 3 sling cords, and a bag of chalk because the forest liked rearranging paths. The first metal fruit hung low, shiny and round. A player cut it down. It screamed like a kettle being murdered. Steel apes dropped from the trees. Everyone ran. I touched one fallen fruit. Click. The duplicate screamed too. That gave me an idea so stupid it had to work. I copied the screaming fruit. Then I copied it again. Then again. Soon I had 16 screaming fruits shrieking in different pitches around me, and every steel ape in the orchard turned toward the noise. Players looked at me like I had doomed us all. I had, but only temporarily. I tied the screaming fruits to duplicated vines, spun them like festival lanterns, and launched them over the trees. The steel apes chased the sound. All of them. Dozens of heavy metal bodies thundered away from the main path, following a flying choir of panic fruit deeper into the dungeon. The orchard went quiet. Everyone stared at the empty branches. I picked the real fruit carefully and put it in my bag. Garrett muttered that I fought like a criminal carnival. I told him that sounded marketable. Deeper inside, the Iron Orchard revealed its trick. The trees did not just grow metal fruit. They grew weapons from the bones of fallen challengers. Blades hung from branches. Spears dangled like icicles. Axes sprouted from trunks. People rushed to grab them. Bad idea. Every weapon was still connected to the tree. When someone pulled one free, the whole orchard swung at them. Branches became blades, roots became chains, leaves became razors. The forest attacked all at once. I dropped flat as a sword branch passed over my head and shaved a line through my hair. That annoyed me. Nobody attacked my hair without consequences. I touched the root under my palm. The ring pulsed. The root was too big to duplicate. But the iron nail growing from the root was not. Click. 2 nails. I copied nails along the root line, one after another, until the tree's own growth pattern got confused. Each duplicate nail pushed against the original root, making tiny distortions. The root tried to move, but its copied nails jammed it like a zipper full of gravel. Then I fired a frost bead into the jammed root. The root cracked. The tree screamed. The screaming fruit screamed with it. Every steel ape in the distance screamed back. For a moment, the dungeon sounded like a metal opera falling downstairs. I used the chaos to climb the main tree. The boss was not an animal. It was the orchard heart, a giant iron fruit beating inside the trunk like a bell. Every time it pulsed, the weapon branches moved. A normal fighter would cut it. I touched it. The ring nearly tore my hand off. The fruit was too big, too magical, too connected. But I did not need to copy the whole heart. I only needed to copy the sound. The ring could not duplicate noise, but it could duplicate the tiny iron flakes vibrating on the heart's surface. I scraped one flake off with a glass mandible, touched it and made 2, then 4, then 8. I scattered them around the chamber. Each flake carried a tiny echo of the heart's pulse. The orchard heard 16 heartbeats. Then 32. Then 64. Every branch received different orders. The weapon trees panicked. Blades swung at roots, roots grabbed branches, screaming fruit dropped everywhere. Steel apes returned, saw the forest fighting itself, and immediately joined in because apparently they hated trees too. I climbed higher while the dungeon started a civil war against its own landscaping. At the top of the heart chamber, a single golden fruit hung from a thin branch. A boss material. Iron Sun apple. Rare enough to make crafters weep. I touched it. The ring burned so hot my glove smoked. Click. A duplicate apple formed, glowing gold and shaking. It would collapse in 3 seconds. I threw it straight down into the orchard heart. The unstable duplicate hit the real heart and released its echo. For 1 second, the heart felt like it had swallowed itself. The pulse reversed. Every weapon branch froze. Every root released. Every screaming fruit went silent. Then the boss heart cracked open, and golden light poured through the trunk. The iron orchard clear reward dropped into my hands. A seed made of metal and sunlight. Owen almost cried when he saw it. Then he told me not to touch it until we had a blast wall. I touched it anyway outside town. One duplicate appeared, shone brighter than noon, then popped and turned a patch of dirt into polished steel. Owen stared at the steel patch. I stared at my ring. If a copied seed could change dirt before fading, then duplicates did not have to last to matter. They only had to act. That became the 4th rule. Temporary objects could create permanent consequences. A copied herb could become potion. A copied key could open a real door. A copied boss material could trigger a real reaction. A copied safe zone crystal could block a real attack. A copied resurrection stone, if I ever got one, might cheat death for 1 heartbeat. That thought stayed with me. Death was the one thing nobody laughed about in Altara. Players could recover from injury, but if a death mark fully formed, you were gone from that run forever. Some people said the mind returned home broken. Some said it stayed trapped in the last place it fell. I did not know which rumor was true. I only knew that everyone feared the black mark. So when a one-use resurrection stone appeared as the prize for the Moonwell Labyrinth, every strong party in Flintgate prepared to enter. Including Serena. She returned with a new staff head, black fire coiling around red crystal. Her followers were fewer, sharper, and meaner. She had stopped recruiting beginners and started surrounding herself with people who liked hurting others as long as someone elegant told them it was strategy. Garrett wanted the stone too. Not because he feared death, though he should have. Because he wanted to prove he could beat me to a prize. I wanted the stone because 1 copy of life was worth more than 1,000 copies of gold. The Moonwell Labyrinth opened at midnight. Its entrance was a spiral stair descending into a silver lake underground. The walls dripped moonlight. The floor shifted every few minutes, turning corridors into loops and dead ends into bridges. Monsters crawled out of reflection pools, not copying us, just forming from moonwater into pale beasts with long claws. I hated the place immediately. Too wet. Too shiny. Too many surfaces that made unstable objects behave strangely. Owen stayed outside to prepare stabilizers. Tessa came to the entrance because fights over resurrection stones always ended badly. She told me not to start trouble. I told her I preferred finishing it. She said that was not comforting. Labyrinth's first trial was a room with 1 bridge and 100 doors. Only 1 door was real. The others led to moonwater traps. Parties argued, tested doors with magic, and lost time. I touched a droplet on the floor. 2 drops. 4. 8. The duplicated drops trembled toward the real door. Why? Because the real door pulled water through tiny cracks. The fake doors were sealed illusions. The droplets followed pressure, not lies. I walked to the correct door while everyone else debated. Garrett saw me and ran after me. Serena saw Garrett and followed him. Wonderful. A parade of people I did not trust. The next room had moon beasts sleeping around crystal pillars. If awakened, they howled and summoned more. I touched one of my chalk pieces. Instead of marking the floor, I duplicated chalk dust into a soft cloud and blew it across the room. The dust settled on invisible tripwires, painting them white. I stepped through carefully. Garrett tried to follow, saw the wires, and managed not to trigger them. Then one of Serena's followers shoved a weaker player forward to test a path. The player hit a wire. The moon beasts woke. Serena's face remained calm. Mine did not. I hate bullies more than monsters. Monsters attack because they are made that way. Bullies choose it, then act surprised when consequences choose them back. The moon beasts lunged at the shoved player. I fired a shield bead. The bubble snapped open around him just in time. Claws scraped blue light. Then I copied the bead. 2 bubbles. 4. 8. Bubble riot detonated in the center of the room. Invisible spheres bounced outward, slamming moon beasts into pillars, shoving Serena's followers into puddles, and launching Garrett into a wall for the second time since I had known him. He groaned from the floor and asked why it was always walls. I told him walls had standards. The player Serena's follower had crawled away safely. Tessa was not inside, but the labyrinth had memory crystals in its walls. I made sure one of them recorded everything. Then I continued. Serena stepped over her soaked follower without looking down. Her smile was gone. Good. Masks were boring. Deeper we went, the more the labyrinth tried to separate us. Corridors folded, bridges sank, silver water rose. At one point, I was trapped in a circular room with no doors and a ceiling covered in glowing runes. The room filled with water inch by inch. No monsters. No treasure. Just a clean, drowning puzzle. I floated on my back and looked at the runes. They were arranged like a clock. Every minute one rune flashed and the water rose faster. I could not reach the ceiling. So I duplicated air. Not directly. The ring could not copy air because there was no clear boundary. But it could copy bubbles. I blew one bubble under the water, caught it against my palm, and touched it. 2 bubbles. 4. 8. Bubbles rose around me in a glittering stream. Most popped immediately. Some carried enough air for quick breaths. I kept making more, turning one breath into many terrible little breaths. Ridiculous. Undignified. Effective. Then I touched a floating chip of stone knocked from the wall. Duplicated stones formed under my feet for half a second each, stepping stones that vanished as I climbed. I jumped from copy to copy, slipped twice, swallowed moonwater, cursed the moon in general, and finally slapped the rune at the top. The water dropped. A hidden door opened. I stumbled out soaked, coughing, alive, and extremely offended. The next chamber held Garrett. He had been separated from his party and was fighting 3 moon beasts alone. His spear flashed, but he was tired. One beast had bitten his arm, another circled behind him. He saw me and looked away like he would rather die than ask for help. So I did not wait for him to ask. I fired a bead of frostwater at the floor, duplicated it twice, and froze the beast's feet. Then I copied a handful of glass mandibles and sent them bouncing through the chamber. The beast shattered into moon mist. Garrett lowered his spear. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said he had it handled. I said clearly because the floor was winning. He almost smiled, hated himself for it, and looked away. That was the first crack in his pride that did not sound ugly. We moved together after that, not as friends, not even as allies, but as 2 people in a death maze who understood that dying separately would be embarrassing. At the labyrinth's heart, we found Serena. She stood before the moonwell, a circular pool of silver water with the resurrection stone floating above it. The stone was small, pale, and shaped like a teardrop. It pulsed with a gentle light that made every wound in the room ache. Serena's remaining followers stood around the pool. So did several captured players, bound with fire cords. She had forced them to trigger traps ahead of her. Now she planned to take the stone. Garrett's spear crackled. I put a hand on his shoulder before he could charge. Not because I cared about Serena. Because the floor around the pool was covered in moonwater, and Serena's staff was already aimed at the reflections. If he charged, she would burn him through the water. I needed her to attack me first. Evil people love attacking when they think they have the advantage. So I stepped into the chamber, alone, hands raised, smiling like an idiot. I told Serena she could have the stone if she admitted she needed a ring clown to open the path. Her eyes narrowed. The fire around her staff turned black. She said my tricks had gone far enough. Then she attacked. Black fire raced across the moonwater, splitting into 5 burning serpents. I threw one shield bead. It blocked the first serpent. I copied it. 2 bubbles caught the second and third. 4 bubbles bounced the rest away, but the heat was too strong. The shield copies shattered like glass. My sleeve caught fire. I slapped it out and ran sideways. Serena followed with streams of flame, carving the floor, boiling the water, filling the chamber with steam. Perfect. Steam meant she could not see my hands. I touched the first fire cord, binding a captive player. The ring hissed. Copying fire was dangerous because flame had no patience for rules. I did not copy the flame. I copied the ash flakes forming on the cord's surface. The echo chain pulled backward. The real cord weakened. The captive snapped free. I did it again. Another cord broke. And another. Serena realized too late. By the time the steam cleared, all her captives were running toward the exit. Garrett blocked the followers who tried to stop them, his spear finally pointed at the right people. Serena screamed and lifted her staff for a killing spell. I touched a drop of moonwater. 2, 4, 8, 16. The drops floated upward in the heat, becoming silver beads around her flame. Then I touched a frost bead and copied it inside the cloud. The temperature snapped. Steam became ice. The ice formed around Serena's black fire in a ring of silver needles. Her spell backfired not into her body but into her staff. The red crystal cracked. She staggered. The resurrection stone pulsed above the moonwell. I leaped for it. Serena threw a blade of black fire at my back. Garrett intercepted it with his spear. The impact threw him across the chamber. For the third time, a wall got involved. But the attack missed me. My fingers closed around the resurrection stone. The ring reacted instantly. It went cold. Not warmed. Not hot. Cold like the space between stars. The stone duplicated in my palm. One original. One copy. The copy was transparent and cracking, barely holding itself together. A one-use resurrection stone. Copied. For maybe 5 seconds. Serena saw it and lunged. I crushed the copy. Golden light exploded outward. Every wounded player in the chamber gasped. Garrett's burned arm healed. My fire-scarred sleeve stitched itself back around living skin. The captured players stopped limping. Even Serena's cracked staff repaired halfway, which annoyed me, but miracles are bad at choosing sides. The original stone remained in my hand. The copied resurrection effect had worked. Only once. Only briefly. But it had worked. That was the 5th rule. Even life could echo. Serena was done pretending. She ordered her followers to kill me and take the ring. Garrett stood beside me. He said he hated me. I said that was fair. Then he pointed his spear at Serena's followers and added that he hated thieves more. I told him personal growth looked weird on him. He told me to shut up and throw something. So I threw everything. Coins became metal mist, teeth became bone comets, nails became spike rain, frost beads burst into slick ice, shield beads bounced black fire into the ceiling. Growth tonic turned scattered seeds into whipping vines that grabbed ankles. Moonwater drops became floating silver lenses that bent Garrett's lightning spear into forked arcs. For one insane minute, the Moonwell chamber became the kind of fight bards exaggerate because the truth sounds fake. Garrett struck one follower with red lightning. I copied the sparks crawling along the wet floor, not the lightning itself, but the charged droplets it left behind. The copied droplets jumped from boot to boot, making every enemy dance like their skeletons had received bad news. Serena fired a flame wheel. I threw screaming iron fruit at it. The fruit duplicated inside the fire and screamed louder, wobbling the wheel off course. It spun into the wall, carved a perfect circle, and revealed a hidden treasure alcove. I made a note to loot that later. One follower charged me with twin blades. I dropped a single apple. He looked confused. Then I duplicated the apple into a rolling carpet under his feet. He went down so hard his blades flew up, crossed in midair, and pinned his own cloak to the ceiling. Owen would have been proud. Tessa arrived with wardens right as the fight ended, guided by the freed captives and the memory crystals I had activated earlier. Serena tried to smile again, tried to say it was all a misunderstanding. Tessa looked at the burned cords, the injured players, the memory crystal glowing with recorded proof, and my very tired face. Then she told Serena to put down the staff. Serena did not. She raised it one last time. I touched the crack in the red crystal from across the room through a chain of scattered copied ash flakes. Echo chain. The crack duplicated inward. The staff split in half. Serena's black fire died in her hands. Tessa took her to jail. Not with a grand speech. Not with politics. Just a crystal baton, iron cuffs, and the quiet satisfaction of a terrible person realizing the world had rules after all. I kept the resurrection stone. Garrett did not complain. That surprised me more than copying it. After the Moonwell labyrinth, Flintgate changed around me. Not because the world adjusted to me. Because people did. The same players who once laughed now moved aside when I walked through the market. Crafters asked Owen for advice. Dungeon parties offered me treasure shares I did not ask for. Weak players who had been bullied started leaving small gifts outside Owen's shop. Herbs, arrow shafts, lucky stones, one basket of apples that Garrett refused to look at. I did not become kind overnight. I had always been kind enough. But now I had power, and power made kindness harder to ignore. I used the ring to solve problems in increasingly stupid ways. Bridge collapsed over a ravine, trapping a caravan on the far side. I copied planks so fast we built a temporary bridge that lasted 6 minutes. Everyone crossed while the bridge sparked beneath their feet. Last wagon rolled off just as the whole thing became silver mist, leaving the driver screaming prayers at every god he knew. A swarm of poison hornets attacked the herb fields. I duplicated smoke pellets until the sky turned gray, then copied tiny bells and tied them to vines. Ringing confused the swarm, the smoke drove them low, and a row of duplicated jars captured them by the hundreds. Owen used the venom for anti-poison medicine. I called it angry honey. A giant crab monster crawled out of the river and started stealing laundry from the town docks. Nobody knew why, it just wanted shirts. I duplicated hooks, rope, and baitfish until the docks became a fishing trap big enough to embarrass a sea god. The crab charged, grabbed a copied shirt stuffed with sleep beads, and passed out wearing 3 scarves. Tessa asked if I had to make every solution look like a circus. I said no. Then I made a circus. Not a real one. A monster lure. Bright copied lanterns, screaming fruit, smoke beads, bell vines, and a rolling carpet of unstable coins. We used it to lead a pack of rampaging stone lizards away from farms and into an empty quarry, where Garrett and I collapsed the entrance behind them. Garrett hated admitting it, but our styles worked together. He hit hard. I made sure the thing he hit was standing in exactly the wrong place. He stopped calling me Ring Clown. He started calling me Carter. Then one day, he called me partner by accident. I told everyone. He threatened to leave me in a dungeon. I duplicated the word partner on chalk signs around town. He did not speak to me for 2 days. It was peaceful. Owen's shop expanded without ever officially expanding. He just knocked down a back wall, added a furnace, then another, then a testing pit, then a reinforced room labeled with a sign that said Carter No. I touched the sign and duplicated it. Owen hung the copies on every dangerous object in the shop. That did not stop me. It slowed me down for almost an hour. The ring's limits kept moving because my understanding kept improving. I learned to duplicate not just objects, but states. A heated nail copied hot. A spinning coin copied spinning. A falling stone copied falling. That meant I could multiply momentum. Carefully because physics in Altara behaved like a drunk horse when insulted. My first momentum test involved dropping 1 pebble from a roof and copying it mid-fall. The copy appeared with the same speed. Then I copied both. 4 falling pebbles hit the ground, harmless. Then I tried it with apples. 1 apple became 2, 2 became 4, 4 became 8, and Garrett walked around the corner at exactly the wrong time. He looked up. 8 apples landed on him. I said it was research. He said research was about to get punched. Then I tried it with stones in the quarry. That became a landslide. Then I tried it with water drops over a fire monster. That became rain. Real rain. Only for half a minute, only in a small area, but enough to turn a burning salamander from a nightmare into a wet noodle with legs. The crowd that watched that fight chanted my name. I pretended not to enjoy it. I enjoyed it a lot. Next major threat came from the Crimson Pit, a dungeon that only opened once a month and dropped boss materials used for high-grade weapons. Serena was in jail, but her absence did not make the world gentle. Greed does not need one leader, it grows new mouths. A group of violent players began ambushing weaker teams near dungeon exits, stealing boss drops after others did the work. They wore dark scarves over their faces and attacked fast, then vanished into rocky gullies before Tessa's wardens arrived. People were scared. Garrett wanted to hunt them directly. Tessa warned him that reckless revenge would get innocent players hurt. I listened, then asked one question. What did thieves love most? Easy treasure. So I became Easy Treasure. Owen hated the plan before I finished explaining it. Garrett hated it after I explained he had to hide inside a cart under a tarp. Tessa hated it because she knew it would work. I walked out of the crimson pit alone at dusk, limping dramatically, carrying a glowing fake boss core the size of a melon. It was not a real boss core. It was a shell of glass mandible, moonfire herb dust, and a tiny iron sun seed shaving, pulsing just enough to look priceless and unstable enough to ruin a bad person's evening. I made sure the dark scarf thieves saw me. Then I walked into the narrowest gully on purpose. They surrounded me before I reached the middle. 10 players. Fast weapons. No armor stereotypes, just blades, hooks, crossbows, and the ugly confidence of people who had won by picking on the tired. Their leader demanded the core. I told him he could have it, but it was fragile. He said he did not care. I smiled. Evil people should care when I warn them. I tossed the fake core. He caught it. The pressure of his grip triggered the first copy. A second glowing core appeared in his other hand. He blinked. Then both cores copied. 4, 8, 16. He screamed and dropped them, but the cores bounced, copied again, and filled the gully with pulsing red lights. The thieves panicked. I dove behind a rock. The cores did not explode. That would have killed them, and I was not here for that. Instead, each core burst into shield bubbles, sleep smoke, sticky vine sap, and a shower of screaming fruit seeds. The gully became a nightmare carnival. Bubbles slammed thieves into walls, sleep smoke dropped 3 instantly, vine sap glued boots to stone, screaming fruit grew from cracks and started wailing. One thief swung a sword at a fruit, making it scream louder. Another tried to run, slipped on duplicated oil, hit a bubble, bounced backward, and landed headfirst in a vine net. Garrett burst from the hidden cart like an angry magician. Tessa's wardens dropped from the ridge. I walked through the chaos, touching copied cuffs Tessa had given me one by one. The cuffs were not official paperwork, just metal circles that clicked shut and stayed shut because Owen had helped improve the hinges. Every thief who had ambushed weaker players ended up bound, sleepy, sticky, and furious. The leader shouted that I had tricked them. I told him he had attacked a limping man in a dark gully for treasure. Then Tessa took him to jail. After that, the exit ambushes stopped. People began calling me the duplicator. I hated the name. It sounded like a cheap stage act. Garrett suggested Apple Lord. I told him partner was still available. He left the room. The Crimson Pit itself gave me the next step. Its boss was a molten centipede with armor plates made from black ruby. It lived under a lake of fire and surfaced only when challengers crossed the basalt chains hanging over the pit. Most teams used frost magic and shields. I used bait. The centipede was attracted to heat, so I copied heated coins, wrapped them in fireproof thread, and launched them into the air over the lava. The coins duplicated while spinning, each one glowing bright from the same heat state. The boss rose toward them, confused by dozens of tiny suns. Garrett struck its exposed side with lightning. The armor cracked. I touched one cracked ruby scale that flew loose. Click. The duplicate appeared and immediately dripped molten red. Too unstable. Too magical. Too hot. So I did not try to keep it. I fired the duplicate back into the crack it came from. Echo chain. The crack widened. Garrett struck again. I copied another scale, jammed another echo, widened another weakness. We turned the boss's own armor into a chain reaction of self-betrayal. Then the centipede dove under lava and whipped its tail, sending a wave of molten fire at the bridge. No shield could cover everyone. I reached into my pouch and grabbed safe zone crystal dust. Owen had warned me never to copy too much at once. I believed him. I did it anyway. I threw the dust into the air and touched the ring with my thumb. The dust doubled. Doubled again. Again. A sparkling blue cloud spread over the bridge. The lava wave hit. For one breath, a safe zone barrier formed, not a perfect dome, but a curtain of blue light stitched from thousands of copied grains. The lava split around us. The barrier lasted exactly 2 seconds. Then it shattered and the leftover heat blew us all backward. But 2 seconds was enough. Nobody died. Garrett looked at me from the floor, smoke rising from his coat. He said I was insane. I told him he kept saying that like it was not working. The centipede roared and rose for the final attack. I had one ruby scale left. One real scale. I touched it. 2, 4, 8, 16. The copies melted faster than I could throw them. I spun the sling anyway, launching red-hot scales in a circle around the boss. Each copy carried the cracked state of the first. Each one struck a different armor joint and echoed weakness inward. Garrett leaped onto a basalt chain, ran along it through rising heat, and drove his spear into the largest crack. I copied the spear tip at the moment of impact. Not the whole spear. Just the lightning-charged edge connected through the metal. For half a second, Garrett's spear had two tips inside one wound. The boss split from head to tail. Molten light erupted. The crimson pit cleared. The reward was a black ruby boss core, a bundle of fireproof thread, and a meteor shard the size of my thumb. The moment I touched it, the ring went silent. Not hot, not cold, silent, like it was listening. The shard was dark gray with tiny stars trapped inside. It weighed almost nothing and pulled on my hand like it wanted to fall upward. Owen told me that meteor shards were fragments from sky dungeons, too rare to waste, too unstable to duplicate safely, too dangerous to even test near town. I said I understood. Then I asked how far from town counted as near. Owen closed his eyes like he was begging patience from the universe. We waited 3 days before testing it. That was restraint by my standards. We went to an empty valley beyond the ash forest. Tessa came because she did not trust me. Garrett came because he said someone needed to drag my body back if I turned into smoke. Owen came because it was his equipment I would probably destroy. I placed the meteor shard on a stone slab. I touched it with one finger. The ring did not click. It chimed. A duplicate shard appeared above the first, floating, flickering with starlight. Then it fell upward, straight into the sky. We all watched it vanish into the clouds. For 5 seconds, nothing happened. Garrett asked if that was it. A star fell. Not a real star. A burning copy of the shard, dragging a white tail across the afternoon sky. It slammed into the valley floor half a mile away, sending up dirt and light. Then a second star fell. Then a third. Owen grabbed my collar. Tessa shouted my name. Garrett just said a word I will not repeat. The copied shard had duplicated its falling state somehow. It had become not an object, but an event, falling, burning, arriving. A rain of tiny meteors began striking the valley. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was absolutely not safe. I grabbed the original shard and focused everything I had on stopping the echo. The ring burned cold and hot at the same time. My vision split into sparks. Every falling copy tugged at the original. I could feel them, dozens of bright threads screaming downward from the sky. Echo chain worked both ways. I had been damaging copies to affect originals. Now the copies were dragging the original into their motion. If I lost control, the real shard might trigger a real meteor fall. So I did the only thing that made sense. I duplicated a safe zone crystal bead in my other hand. 1 bead. 2, 4, 8. Blue bubbles burst around us. The meteor copies struck the bubbles and ricocheted upward, bouncing back into the sky like angry fireworks. The valley became a storm of falling stars and bouncing shields. Garrett laughed. Not nervous laughter. Real laughter. He was covered in dust, his coat was smoking, and he looked happier than he had at the altar. He shouted that I had finally found something worse than apples. I told him to help or become a crater. He stabbed his spear into the ground and poured lightning into the safe bubbles, charging them. The next falling star hit a charged bubble and split into harmless sparks. Owen threw stabilizing dust into the wind, hardening some of the bubbles. Tessa used her crystal baton to anchor the largest shield to the ground. For once, my ridiculous power needed everyone. And everyone did their parts. I pulled the echo threads together, forced the falling copies into one point above the valley, and touched the meteor shard with every bit of control I had learned since the first coin. The copies collapsed. The sky flashed white. A single harmless starburst bloomed above us, wide enough for Flintgate to see in daylight. When the light faded, I was on my knees, smoke rising from my ring, laughing like an idiot. The meteor shard rested in my palm. It had a new crack down the middle. Not broken. Awakened. That was the 6th rule. Some objects were too powerful to duplicate as things. They duplicated as disasters. And disasters could be aimed. Word of the daylight starburst spread faster than any rumor before it. People came from other towns to see the valley craters. Crafters begged Owen for meteor dust. Fighters asked Garrett what it felt like to battle falling stars. Tessa made me promise not to test sky objects without warning her first. I promised. Mostly. Serena heard about it from jail. I know because 2 nights later, someone tried to break her out. Not a political faction, not a secret order, just loyal criminals and greedy fools who believed Serena could still lead them to power if they put a staff back in her hands. They attacked the jail at midnight with smoke bombs and fire charms. Tessa had expected trouble. So had I. Because people who love power do not stop wanting it just because a door closes. The jail was built from stone and safe zone crystal, but its outer courtyard had old drainage tunnels. I found them while helping Tessa inspect the place earlier. She told me not to set traps without telling her. I told her everything. Almost everything. The attackers slipped through the drainage tunnel and emerged into the courtyard. They found a silver ring lying on the ground. Not mine. A fake, of course. One of them picked it up. A recorded voice from a hidden crystal played my words softly. Nice choice. Then the courtyard floor clicked. I had embedded duplicated nails under thin clay tiles, each one stabilized just long enough to wait. When the fake ring was lifted, the stabilizer broke. The nails copied sideways. Not upward. Sideways. A cage of iron spikes unfolded around the attackers, like a flower made by a very angry carpenter. They shouted and tried to cut free. The spikes duplicated again, forming a second cage outside the first. Then the safe zone bead above them activated. A bubble formed inside the cage, pushing them gently but firmly into the center until they were squeezed together like fruit in a basket. Nobody died. Nobody escaped. Tessa walked out with wardens, saw the entire group trapped, and looked at me. I told her I had mentioned almost all of it. She said we would discuss the word almost later. Inside the jail, Serena had used the distraction to melt her cell bars with a smuggled ember charm. She made it 3 steps into the hallway before Garrett stepped from the shadows. He had volunteered to guard the inner door. She mocked him for becoming my guard dog. He said at least dogs were loyal. She attacked with black fire from the charm. Garrett blocked it, but the charm's flame crawled along his spear, eating the lightning. He gritted his teeth. Serena was weaker without her staff, but still dangerous. I arrived behind her and tossed a coin. She did not even turn. She flicked black fire and melted it. That was what I wanted. The melted coin splashed onto the floor in silver droplets. I touched the nearest droplet with my boot. Click. The droplets doubled around her feet. Then I copied the heat state from her own flame into the silver. The floor became a ring of molten sparks. Serena jumped back, exactly where I had placed a shield bead. The bubble opened behind her and bounced her forward. Garrett swept her legs. She fell. The ember charm flew from her hand. I touched it before it hit the floor. The copy appeared, unstable and burning black. I crushed the copy. Echo chain cracked the original charm. The black fire vanished. Tessa arrived at the end of the hall. Serena looked at me from the floor with hate so sharp it almost felt like respect. She said the ring would ruin me. I told her it had already ruined several perfectly good apples. Tessa took her back to a deeper cell, one without bars close enough to melt and with enough crystal in the walls to make magic behave. That should have been the end of Serena for a long time. But her warning stuck. Not because I feared the ring. Because I knew she was partly right. Power does not ruin people by being evil. Power ruins people by making every crazy idea possible. And my ideas had always been crazy. So I set rules for myself. No copying living things. No unstable tests inside town. No using resurrection echoes unless someone would die without them. No creating disasters I could not aim. Garrett heard the rules and asked who would enforce them. I held up my hand. He laughed. Owen said that was the least reassuring answer in human history. But it mattered to me. I had started as the guy everyone laughed at because I chose a plain silver ring. Now weak players watch me for hope, greedy players watch me for opportunity, and dangerous people watch me for fear. If I became careless, the ring would not be the joke anymore. I would. The next climb came from the Skyhook Tower. It was not a dungeon underground. It was a broken tower hanging from chains in the clouds, connected to the earth by a spiral of floating stone steps. Wind monsters circled it, lightning nests clung to its sides. At the top, people said, was a vault containing storm cores used to craft flight gear. I wanted a storm core. Owen wanted a storm core. Garrett wanted to fight something dramatic at high altitude because apparently walls had bored him and he wanted the ground to be farther away. Tessa told us to be careful. I told her careful was one of my middle names. She asked what the others were. I said explosive and unnecessary. She did not laugh. The climb was awful. Floating steps shifted in the wind. Harpies with iron feathers dove from clouds. Lightning nests spat electric threads that tried to wrap around ankles and yank players into the sky. The first time a harpy attacked, I duplicated a feather it dropped. Feathers copied strangely. The duplicates were light, unstable, and desperate to fly. I touched one, then another, then threw a handful around my cloak. For 3 seconds, I had a feather storm lifting me off the steps. Then the copies destabilized. I dropped 10 feet, landed on Garrett, and almost sent us both into the clouds. He said flight was banned. I said falling was just flight with commitment issues. But the feather copies gave me an idea. I could create bursts of lift. Not flying, jumping with style. In gaps opened between steps, I copied feathers under my boots and launched across. When harpies dove, I duplicated their own falling feathers into clouds that clogged their wings. When lightning threads wrapped a player nearby, I copied the metal hook at the end of the thread, making it too heavy and tangled for the nest to pull back. By the middle of the tower, other parties had stopped mocking my methods and started waiting to see what stupid miracle I would use next. The tower guardian waited at the outer ring. It was a thunder rock, a giant bird made of storm clouds, iron bones, and glowing blue eyes. Its wings stretched from one side of the tower to the other. Every flap sent lightning crawling over the steps. Garrett grinned. I hated that grin. It meant he had a straightforward plan involving violence and poor self-preservation. He jumped first, spear raised. The rock screamed and struck him with a wing blast. Garrett flew backward, but I had already copied harpy feathers beneath him. A burst of lift shoved him upward again, turning his fall into a sideways spin. He used it, twisted midair, and stabbed the rock's wing joint. Lightning exploded. I copied the sparks clinging to his spear tip. The copies became tiny blue beads of charged light. I slung them around the rock in a circle. The bird attacked with lightning. The lightning followed the charged beads instead of us. For 1 second, I had made a necklace for a thunderstorm. Then I tightened it. Not physically, by echo. Each charged bead carried a whisper of Garrett's spear impact. I crushed one bead in my fist and the rest sparked inward. The rock's wing joints locked. It began to fall. So did the platform. Because of course the boss was connected to the tower chain, and damaging it shook everything. Stone steps broke loose, players screamed, the tower tilted, the cloud sea opened below us like a mouth without a bottom. I grabbed a falling stone step. Too big to copy for long. I did it anyway. One duplicate step appeared under my boots. Then another. Then another. I ran across copies that vanished behind me, building a staircase in midair, one heartbeat at a time. My ring burned, my arm went numb, my lungs felt like they were full of sparks. Garrett was hanging from the rock's wing, laughing and shouting something about best fight ever. I copied a chain link from the tower. The duplicate link appeared around the rock's leg. Another. A chain of unstable copies wrapped the boss midfall. I anchored the last link to a real tower hook using echo chain. The fall stopped with a sound like the sky cracking. The rock swung under the tower, trapped. Garrett climbed onto its back and drove his spear into the storm core in its chest. I copied the core's outer shell just as it cracked. A duplicate shell formed around the original, forcing the released storm energy inward instead of outward. The rock collapsed into rain. A real storm core dropped into my hand, humming with captured thunder. Then the copied shell burst, and a tiny storm cloud appeared above my head. It followed me for the next 2 days, raining whenever I lied. Owen found this hilarious. I found it inconvenient. Garrett kept asking me questions just to make it rain. Tessa asked if I had broken the weather. I told her no. The cloud rained on me. Fine, maybe a little. The storm core became the heart of my first major crafted relic. Owen called it the duplicate launcher. I called it the bad idea cannon. It was a wrist-mounted device that could hold one small object, spin it with storm energy, and release it at the exact moment my ring duplicated it. Instead of throwing copies randomly, I could aim them in a line, a spread, a spiral, or a delayed burst. The first test fired one nail through 3 targets. The duplicate nail followed half a breath later. then 4, then 8. A wooden target became sawdust in the shape of regret. The second test used slime drops. We do not discuss the second test. The third test used safe zone beads. That created a moving shield wall. A line of blue bubbles rolled forward, pushing everything in front of it. Barrels, rocks, training dummies, Garrett, one confused goat. The goat became local legend. With the launcher, my power changed from clever tricks to battlefield control. I could block paths, create cover, flood spaces with traps, launch bait, split enemy formations, turn one useful object into a temporary army of nonsense. Because I still looked like a guy with a plain silver ring, enemies kept underestimating me until the sky started falling on their heads. The next threat was personal. Not Serena, not Garrett, not a dungeon. A monster called the Holoduke appeared in the dead mines north of Flintgate. That was just its title, not a political thing. Monsters in Altara loved dramatic names. This one was a tall, faceless thing made of bone plates and dark cloth, carrying a lantern full of trapped blue flames. It did not command armies, it hunted. Anyone killed by the lantern had their death mark speed up instantly. No second chance. No slow fade. Just gone. 3 parties entered the mines and only one person crawled out, shaking too hard to speak. Tessa wanted to seal the mine until stronger fighters came from other towns. Garrett wanted to go immediately. Owen told me not to even think about it. I thought about it. Then I prepared. Holoduke was dangerous because its lantern flame erased recovery time. If it hit me, a resurrection copy might not be fast enough, so I needed distance, decoys, and something that could interfere with the lantern. I made decoy rings from cheap silver and coated them with a faint echo of my mana. I made 20. Owen said any monster smart enough to hunt players would not fall for jewelry. I said no monster expected jewelry to explode into apples. He stopped arguing because he had met me. Garrett insisted on coming. I told him this was not a duel. He said good because duels had rules and he wanted to stab something ugly. Tessa came too, not to fight the boss, but to pull survivors out and make sure no reckless idiots followed us. She looked directly at me when she said reckless idiots. I looked behind me to see who she meant. She did not laugh. Dead mines were colder than they should have been. Every tunnel had old rails, broken carts, and crystals that no longer glowed. The air smelled like dust and fear. I marked our path with duplicated chalk arrows, but the chalk dimmed quickly, like the mines swallowed light. We found the first trapped flame in a lantern hanging from a beam. Not the boss's lantern, a smaller one. Inside it, a blue flame flickered like a tiny soul. I touched the glass. The ring went numb. The flame could not be copied. But the glass could. A duplicate lantern formed, empty, unstable, and cold. I threw it down the tunnel. The mine reacted. Bone plates unfolded from the walls, forming skeletal hands that grabbed the empty lantern and crushed it. So the Duke's traps hunted containers. Interesting. I touched one of my fake rings and tossed it onto a rail cart. The ring copied when it hit metal. 2, 4, 8. The cart rolled downhill, carrying a glittering pile of fake rings. Every trap in the tunnel woke up and attacked the cart like it had insulted their ancestors. Bone hands blew fire darts, hanging chains, hidden spikes. The cart took all of it, rolled faster, then exploded into apples because I had packed the bottom with fruit seeds and growth tonic. A wave of apple vines filled the trap tunnel. Garrett looked at me. I told him apples were a proven combat doctrine. He said he hated that I was right. Deeper in, the Holoduke found us. It did not roar. It did not run. It appeared at the end of a tunnel, lantern swinging, faceless head tilted like it was listening to our heartbeats. Then the blue flame inside the lantern flared. My ring tightened on my finger. Every copied object in my pouch destabilized at once. Coins hissed, nails sparked, shield beads cracked. The lantern flame killed unstable things. That meant it could kill my entire fighting style. The Duke moved. Fast. One moment at the end of the tunnel, the next halfway to us, cloth body gliding without footsteps. Garrett charged. The Duke lifted the lantern. Blue fire washed over Garrett's spear, dimming the lightning. He stumbled. I fired the bad idea cannon. A storm of nails shot down the tunnel. The lantern flared. Every duplicated nail vanished before hitting. The original nail bounced off the Duke's shoulder like a sad insect. For the first time since the altar, my ring felt useless. The Duke raised a bone hand toward Garrett's face. I threw a real shield bead. Not copied. Real. The bubble formed and blocked the hand. The lantern flame ate the bubble in 1 second. But 1 second was enough for Garrett to roll away. We ran. No shame. Sometimes being clever starts with not dying in the first minute. The Duke followed slowly, because monsters with terrifying lanterns apparently understood drama. I needed a new angle. If copied objects vanished near the lantern, then the lantern was not just destroying matter, it was collapsing instability. So I needed to give it too much instability to eat. Owen would hate the plan. Good thing he was outside. I told Garrett to keep the Duke busy for 10 seconds. He asked why it was always 10 seconds. I said because 15 would be rude. He threw himself back into the tunnel with a roar spear spinning red light. The Duke turned toward him. I opened every pouch I had. Coins, teeth, nails, glass mandibles, frost beads, oil beads, chalk, apple seeds, safe zone dust. All the tiny objects that had carried me from joke to menace. I poured them onto the floor and touched the pile with both hands. The ring screamed. Everything doubled. The lantern flared and erased half the copies. I doubled the rest. It erased them. I doubled again. The tunnel filled with silver sparks as creation and collapse fought each other. The Duke's lantern burned brighter, greedily eating every unstable copy I made. That was exactly the trap. The lantern could erase instability, but it had to hold the erased energy somewhere. The blue flame swelled. The glass cracked. Garrett saw it and dove behind a minecart. I copied one last thing. A real iron nail, already heated from the ring's burn, spinning between my fingers. The duplicate lasted less than a blink before the lantern ate it. But the echo chain had formed. I crushed the original nail. The echo snapped into the lantern glass at the exact moment it was overloaded. Crack! The hollow Duke froze. Blue flame leaked from the lantern like water from a broken jar. It tried to turn away. Tessa appeared behind it and threw her crystal baton. The baton struck the leaking flame and pinned it to the wall in a burst of blue light. Garrett drove his spear through the Duke's chest. I fired the bad idea cannon with the one object the lantern could no longer erase. Glass. 1 mandible became 2. 4. 8. A spiral of blades shredded the bone plates. The hollow Duke collapsed into cloth, dust, and a cracked lantern core. I caught the core before it hit the ground. It pulsed with blue flame. A resurrection stone saved life. A hollow lantern stole the space where life could return. I did not like it, but I knew it was useful. Owen liked it even less. When we brought it back, he refused to touch it until Tessa stood nearby with her baton and Garrett stood outside because Owen said the shop had a maximum capacity for idiots. We learned the lantern core could stabilize duplicates by burning away their failure. Dangerous, limited, but incredible. With the shaving of the lantern core inside a crafting frame, copied objects lasted 3 times longer. The first fully stabilized duplicate I made was a copper coin. It lasted all night. At dawn, it faded. A whole night. From 10 seconds to a whole night. I held the original coin in my palm and remembered the altar laughter. 1 coin had become 2. A joke had become a weapon. A weapon had become a craft. A craft had become a storm. And I was not close to done. Flintgate held a tournament after the hollow Duke fell. Not politics, not titles. Just fighters being fighters, crafters selling snacks, and crowds wanting to see who was strongest now that the starter generation had survived enough disasters to develop egos. Garrett entered immediately. I did not. Then he told everyone I was scared. So I entered immediately. Owen set up a stall selling stabilizer packets and refused to sell me anything during matches because he said I should suffer the consequences of my own confidence. Tessa watched from the side with a face that said she expected at least 1 arrest. The early matches were easy. Not because my opponents were weak, but because duels reward surprise, and I had become surprised with shoes. One sword user rushed me with a blade that grew longer every swing. I duplicated the buckle on his belt. The copy appeared inside the loop, jammed it, and his belt snapped. His pants dropped. The crowd roared. He surrendered before I attacked, because dignity has a health bar. One staff user summoned stone hands from the ground. I copied the pebbles between the fingers until the hands could not close. Then I filled the palms with oil beads and turned the whole arena into a bowling lane. One beast user sent a horned wolf at me. I could not copy the wolf, so I copied its collar ring, then echo cracked the latch. The wolf stopped, realized it was free, and left the arena to steal sausages from a food cart. I won by snack-based liberation. Garrett fought beautifully, which annoyed me because he was actually getting better. He stopped overcommitting. He used short strikes. He watched the ground for traps. He even avoided apples thrown by spectators. Personal growth is irritating when it belongs to someone you enjoy teasing. We met in the final match. The arena was packed. People climbed roofs. Owen stood with a towel over one shoulder like he was seconds away from cleaning blood or soup. Tessa stood by the gate. Serena was not there, obviously, but I imagined her hearing the cheers from jail and grinding her teeth. Garrett stepped into the circle with his red spear on his shoulder. He said no apples. I said no promises. The match began. He did not charge. Smart. He waited spear low, watching my hands. So I attacked first. I fired a nail spread. He spun his spear and knocked them away before they duplicated, striking the originals at just the right angle. He had learned my release timing. Good. I threw chalk dust. He used lightning to burn it before it settled. I launched shield beads. He pierced the bubbles with precise thrusts, popping them instead of getting pushed. The crowd started chanting his name. For the first time in a duel, someone was not falling for the obvious tricks. Garrett grinned. He said he had been watching. I told him that was creepy. Then he moved. Fast enough that I barely saw the spear tip. I blocked with a safe bead, but he feinted, struck the ground, and sent lightning through the arena floor. It jumped toward the metal in my pouches. My own nails shocked me. I stumbled. He swept my legs. I hit the dirt. The crowd gasped. Garrett stood over me, spear point inches from my chest. He had me. Almost. I smiled. He frowned. Then the arena under him clicked. Before the match, I had not placed traps. That would be cheating, and Tessa would have hit me with the baton. But during the match, every time one of my nails was knocked away, every chalk grain burned, every shield bead popped, every object Garrett thought he had destroyed, I had been mapping where the remains landed. The arena was covered in tiny fragments, all touching the ground, all connected by dust, sweat, and impact lines. I placed my palm flat on the dirt. I did not copy the fragments. I copied their shadows. Tiny dark shapes on the arena floor, each one a boundary, each one simple and light. The ring accepted them as objects for less than a heartbeat. 1,000 duplicate shadows flickered around Garrett's feet. He froze because his eyes tried to track all of them. Then I copied one real coin under his boot. The coin became two, pushing upward. His stance shifted by an inch. 1 inch was all I needed. I rolled, kicked his ankle, and fired the bad idea cannon straight up. Not at him. At my own falling coin. The coin duplicated into a spinning column above us, each copy reflecting sunlight. Garrett looked up by instinct. I touched a feather. Lift burst under me. I rose from the dirt, grabbed his spear shaft, and copied the little decorative ring below the spearhead. The duplicate ring appeared around the shaft, jammed his grip, and stopped his follow-up strike. Then I tapped his forehead with 2 fingers. The crowd went silent. Garrett stared at me. I said boop. The arena exploded with laughter and cheers. Garrett could have been angry. The old Garrett would have been. Instead, he lowered his spear and laughed so hard he had to sit down. I won the tournament by forehead boop. The prize was a choice between gold, a rare weapon, or a dungeon map leading to the Starfall Gate. I chose the map. Owen groaned. Tessa asked why I could not choose gold like a normal greedy person. I held up the meteor shard. Because the map showed a place where meteor fragments were not rare. They were falling every night. Starfall Gate lay far beyond Flintgate, past the ash forest, the glass ravines, and the old battlefield where broken weapons grew out of the ground like weeds. We prepared for 2 weeks. Owen strengthened the bad idea cannon with stormcore wire. Garrett trained with shield beads until he could bounce lightning off them on purpose. Tessa arranged for wardens to protect Flintgate while she was gone because she insisted on coming after seeing the map. She said someone had to stop me if I tried to duplicate the sky. I said that sounded unfairly specific. She said experience was a cruel teacher. The road to Starfall was not peaceful. The old battlefield had iron ghosts, not true spirits, but leftover armor shapes animated by old magic. They attacked anything that moved, swinging rusted weapons and dragging chains. I copied rust flakes. The duplicates carried weakness. I scattered them over the iron ghosts, then used echo chain to make their joints crumble. Garrett shattered them with lightning. Tessa anchored the battlefield paths with crystal light so we did not wander into old trap fields. At night, we camped under broken banners and watched distant stars fall beyond the mountains. Garrett asked what I would do if I could duplicate a real meteor. I said probably apologize afterward. Owen, who had come with us despite every survival instinct he owned, said apologies did not fix craters. I told him that was why we brought Tessa. Tessa said she did not fix craters either. I said not with that attitude. Nobody laughed except Garrett. That was enough. We reached Starfall Gate on the third night. It was not a gate like the others. It was a ring of black stones standing in the middle of a crater field, each stone carved with star patterns. Above it, the sky bent inward, and tiny meteors fell in slow motion, burning blue before vanishing just above the ground. The dungeon entrance opened only when a meteor touched the center stone. Parties had tried to force it before and failed. I stood in the crater, watched the falling lights, and realized the trick. The meteors vanished because they were copies. Not mine. Gate created falling echoes from somewhere higher, testing whether challengers understood temporary stars. I held up my cracked meteor shard. It pulled toward the center stone. I touched it. The duplicate formed, floated upward, then began to fall. I guided it with the ring, not fighting the motion this time, just shaping it. The copied shard struck the center stone. The gate opened like an eye. Inside was the Starfall Vault. A canyon under a night sky that existed underground. Meteors crossed above us. Crystal bridges connected floating islands. Silver rivers flowed upward. Monsters made of comet dust prowled along the cliffs, their bodies leaving trails of sparks. It was the most beautiful place I had ever seen. It immediately tried to kill us. A comet beast leaped from a cliff, jaws open, body burning blue. Garrett struck it midair. His spear passed through dust and light. The monster reformed behind him. Tessa's crystal baton pinned its shadow for half a second. That gave me the clue. The beasts were not solid until they attacked. So I let one attack me. Owen shouted my name. The beast lunged. The instant its claws became real, I touched one spark falling from its body. Click. The spark duplicated. Then I copied the duplicated spark into a ring around the beast. The ring of sparks carried the beast's attack state. For half a second, every part of it tried to become solid at once. Garrett hit it then. The comet beast shattered into blue dust. Owen was furious. He said my plan had been to let the monster almost kill me. I said almost was the important word. Tessa said she understood Serena better every day. That hurt more than the claw scratch. The vault was filled with challenges built around timing. Bridges appeared only when meteors passed overhead. Doors opened only during starbursts. Treasure crystals became solid for 3 seconds after comet beasts died. It was made for my ring. Or maybe my ring was made for places like this. I copied falling pebbles to create step paths across gaps. I duplicated star sparks to freeze comet beasts. I copied upward flowing river drops to make floating water stairs. I used safe zone beads to bounce falling meteors aside, then used their redirected paths to smash locked doors. At one point, a treasure island drifted away from us across empty sky. Garrett said we had missed it. I touched a chain link hanging from a broken bridge. The duplicate link appeared connected to the original for 1 heartbeat. I copied it again and again, creating a chain of unstable links stretching across the gap. Garrett grabbed one end and threw me the other. The whole chain sparked, sagged, and began to fade. We pulled. The island moved. Owen screamed because we were dragging a floating island with a chain made of temporary bad decisions. The island slammed into our bridge, cracked the rail, and dumped treasure crystals at our feet. I told Owen it worked. He sat down and refused to speak for 10 minutes. The central vault held the star anvil. A massive black stone floating above a pool of silver fire. Around it hovered meteor shards, storm cores, moon crystals, and pieces of unknown metal that hummed like sleeping bells. Owen looked at the anvil the way Serena looked at power, except Owen's hunger was pure craft. He did not want to own everything. He wanted to understand it. The anvil could bind unstable duplicates into temporary relics. Not permanent, but powerful. With the lantern core shaving, the storm core wire, and meteor dust, Owen forged me a new ring frame around the original silver band. The plain ring remained. It had to. The new frame did not replace it. It gave it channels, like giving a river stone banks. When the forging ended, the ring looked almost the same at first glance. Still silver. Still simple. But tiny star lines now ran under the surface, appearing only when light hit them. I touched a coin. Click. 2 coins. The duplicate did not spark. It shimmered calmly for a full minute before fading. Then I touched the meteor shard. The ring chimed. 1 copy rose above my palm. This time it did not become an uncontrolled disaster. It waited. I could feel the fall inside it, coiled like a spring. Aimable. I smiled. Garrett took 1 step back. Smart man. Then the vault guardian woke. Of course it did. Star Anvil's shadow stretched across the pool of silver fire and rose into a giant shape. It had no face, no royal shape, no armor stereotype, just a body made of black stone plates and constellations. In its chest spun a miniature night sky. It lifted 1 hand. Every meteor shard in the chamber pointed at us. Owen whispered that we should not break the anvil. I told him I would try to only break the angry part. The guardian fired the shards. I copied a safe zone crystal bead. 1 shield. 2. 4. The first meteor volley hit, shattering the bubbles instantly. Too strong. Garrett deflected 3 shards with lightning and nearly lost his spear. Tessa anchored a crystal barrier in front of Owen. It cracked under 1 impact. The guardian was not reacting to me. It was guarding the anvil from everyone. Good. No special targeting. Just power. Power I could trick. I touched 1 fallen meteor shard and copied its aimed state. The duplicate wanted to fly toward me because that was what the original had been doing. I turned my wrist. The ring fought me. The duplicate screamed. Then its trajectory bent. It shot sideways and slammed into another incoming shard. Both exploded. I had learned to redirect falling events. Now I needed to redirect a storm. The guardian lifted both hands. Dozens of shards rose. Garrett asked if I had a plan. I said yes. He asked if he would hate it. I said deeply. I fired the bad idea cannon at the ceiling with a single chalk pellet. The pellet duplicated into a cloud of white dust, marking every path of moving air, every current of heat, every invisible pull from the guardian's magic. The chamber filled with lines like a map of wind. Then I touched the meteor shard in my palm and copied it. 1 star. 2. 4. 8. I did not release them. I held their falling state inside the ring until my hand felt like it would split. The guardian fired. I released mine. A rain of falling stars burst from my palm, not from the sky, but from the space in front of me. Each copied meteor followed one of the chalk-marked currents. They curved, dipped, rose, and slammed into the guardian's volley with perfect disrespect. The chamber became a starstorm. Meteor hit meteor, sparks filled the air, shockwaves shook the anvil. Owen threw himself over his tools. Tessa's barrier cracked again. Garrett stood in the open, spear spinning, laughing like the idiot he had always been, but now in a way I appreciated. The guardian stepped through the explosions and punched the floor. Gravity flipped. We fell upward. The star anvil dropped below us. The ceiling rushed closer. Owen screamed. I touched a feather. Lift became meaningless because up had changed. So I touched a falling stone chip. The chip was falling upward with us. I copied it, then crushed the copy. Echo chain tugged on the original's motion. A whisper. Not enough. I touched 10 chips through the dust cloud. Copied. Crushed. Echoed. The fall slowed. Garrett stabbed his spear into a floating bridge chunk and anchored himself. Tessa threw her crystal baton into the anvil's base, creating a line of blue force. Owen grabbed my belt and said many things about my intelligence that I chose not to remember. The guardian tried to crush us against the ceiling with reversed gravity. I had 1 resurrection stone. 1 original. I had promised not to use echoes unless someone would die. The ceiling was very close. I touched the stone. A copy formed. Golden transparent, already cracking. I crushed it. Life echo exploded through us, not reviving death but reinforcing the thin line before death. Bones strengthened, lungs filled, muscles surged. Garrett tore his spear free and hurled it downward at the guardian. Tessa pulled her baton line tight. I copied the spear tip mid-fall. 2 tips. 4. 8. A red lightning drill formed around Garrett's weapon and struck the guardian's chest. The constellation core cracked. Gravity snapped back. We fell downward. This time I copied the upward river drops from a silver stream and made a fountain beneath us. We crashed into floating water instead of stone, tumbled through it, and landed in a heap beside the anvil. The guardian staggered. Its cracked chest pulled every loose star in the room inward. If it repaired, we were finished. I ran toward it. No plan beyond the next 3 seconds. Sometimes that is enough. I touched the crack in its chest. The ring went silent again. Too big. Too magical. Too connected. I did not copy the guardian. I copied the empty space inside the crack. For one impossible heartbeat, the ring accepted absence as an object because the crack had boundaries. The empty space doubled. The crack widened. The guardian froze. Garrett's spear returned to his hand, dragging lightning. Tessa struck the floor with her baton, anchoring the guardian's feet. Owen, who hated danger but loved a perfect craft, threw a handful of stabilizing dust directly into the cracked constellation core. I touched the meteor shard. 1 falling star formed above my palm. I aimed it not at the guardian, at the copied emptiness inside its chest. The star fell sideways into nothing. The guardian collapsed inward, folding into its own crack, shrinking from giant to statue to stone fist to a single black gem that dropped onto the anvil with a soft ping. The starfall vault went quiet. Then the anvil rang once, deep and proud. A clear reward appeared above it. Meteor Halo would have been an easy name, but Owen preferred Orbit Band. It was a small ring of star metal, too large for a finger, made to fit around a crafting core. Owen called it an orbit band. It could hold copied objects in rotation around a center point for much longer than normal. That meant traps that waited, shields that circled, meteor shards that hovered until released. It meant my ring could stop being only a touch power and become a battlefield engine. I looked at Owen. He looked terrified. I looked at Garrett. He looked excited. I looked at Tessa. She looked like she was already planning my arrest if I smiled too wide. I smiled anyway. When we returned to Flintgate, the whole town gathered at the gate. Not for a parade. Not for a title. Just because word had arrived ahead of us that the Starfall Vault had been cleared and the sky over the mountains had flashed with falling stars. The same people who once watched me choose the playing ring now watched me walk in with meteor dust on my coat, a Stormcore launcher on my wrist, and Garrett carrying the broken remains of a Star Guardian's stone plate like a trophy. Nobody laughed. That felt good. But the best part came later. A little kid at the market dropped a copper coin near my boot. It spun once and landed heads up. He looked scared to ask for it back. I picked it up, touched it with the ring, and made a copy. 2 coins in my palm. The duplicate shimmered calmly for a minute now. I gave him both. His eyes widened like I had handed him a dragon. He asked if the ring was legendary. I looked at the plain silver band, still scratched from the altar, still simple under the star lines. I said no. Then I winked. I said it was worse. For a while, life became almost peaceful. Almost is a dangerous word around me. Owen built the orbit band into a floating ring frame that hovered behind my wrist when activated. It held copied objects in small circles around me, like moons around a very irresponsible planet. Nails, beads, seeds, coins, feathers, glass blades, safe zone dust, even tiny meteor sparks. With it, I could prepare combinations before a fight. A shield moon. A nail moon. A potion moon. An apple moon because tradition matters. The orbit band made me look ridiculous and terrifying at the same time, which was my favorite balance. Garrett trained against it and learned to strike between rotating copies. He got faster, I got trickier. Our sparring matches became town entertainment. People bet on whether he would get hit by apples, bubbles, or something new. Once I duplicated a handful of feathers and made his coat fly over his head mid-charge. He won that match anyway by tackling me blindly. Respect is complicated. Tessa used my traps to catch criminals outside town, not by giving me orders, because I hated being ordered around, and not through paperwork, because none of us had patience for that. She simply told me where bad people were hurting others, and I made the ground there extremely educational. Bandits tried to rob herb gatherers. They found a trail of rare moonflower basil leading into a clearing. The herbs were copies. The clearing was a bubble trap. Tessa collected them while they bounced gently against invisible walls, yelling threats nobody took seriously. A thief tried to steal Owen's stabilizer formula. He opened the wrong drawer and triggered a cloud of duplicated chalk that covered him head to toe in bright white powder. Then the powder formed arrows pointing at him from every wall. Tessa arrived to find him hiding behind a furnace, while every surface in the shop accused him. A gang tried to sell fake resurrection stones. I bought one, touched it, and nothing happened because it was painted glass. Then I sold them a fake ring. They tried to use it to duplicate their fake stones in front of a crowd. The ring released 32 screaming fruits. The crowd learned a valuable lesson about scams and fruit-based justice. The gang went to jail smelling like apples. The more I climbed, the more I understood why people feared strange powers. A sword cut where it swung. A staff burned where it aimed. My ring changed the rules of small things, and small things were everywhere. A single nail could become a cage. A single seed could become a forest. A single drop could become rain. A single shard could become stars. And a single mistake could become a crater. So I trained harder. Not my body, though Garrett forced me to do that too. I trained control. I learned how to stop a duplicate halfway, letting it form as a ghost outline and fade without effect. I learned how to copy only an edge, only a tip, only a surface layer. I learned how to sense instability like temperature. Hot meant violent, cold meant deep magic, silent meant disaster. I learned that my ring did not double anything I touched. Not yet. It doubled anything I understood well enough to define. A coin was easy. A meteor was hard. A crack was possible. An empty space inside a crack had been insane. That meant the real weapon was never the ring. It was attention. Everyone else looked for treasure. I looked for boundaries, edges, connections, weak points, moments. That was why evil people kept losing. They attacked my body, my shop, my friends, my reputation. They never attacked the second when their own weapon became my material. The next time Serena returned, she knew that. Yes, she returned. Not by escaping jail with some grand conspiracy. She was transferred to a deeper prison after the breakout attempt, and on the road, a monster attack shattered the transport crystal. Tessa later said Serena vanished in the confusion. No politics. No hidden faction. Just a dangerous person getting one more chance to be dangerous. When I heard, I did not panic. I prepared. Serena would not come straight for me. She knew I expected that. She would not attack Owen's shop the same way. She would not try to steal the ring by hand, she had learned. So where would she go? To something I wanted. The Meteor Valley. A cracked shard in my ring pulled faintly every time a star fell. Serena had seen enough to understand its value. If she could not take my ring, she could take the sky material that made it stronger. We reached the valley near midnight. The craters glowed with star dust. Meteors fell in the distance, small and blue. At the center stood Serena, holding a new weapon. Not a staff. A black glass fan, each rib filled with stolen flame. She looked thinner, sharper, less holy, more honest. Around her were no followers. Good. She had finally run out of people to hide behind. She said I had become impressive. I said jail did wonders for her honesty. Garrett raised his spear. Tessa lifted her baton. Owen stayed behind a rock because he had the only correct survival instinct. Serena opened the fan. Black fire spread across the valley floor in thin lines, connecting crater to crater. She was not aiming at us. She was heating meteor dust. The dust began to rise. Hundreds of tiny star fragments lifted from the craters, each one glowing red-black from her flame. She had figured out the same thing I had. Meteor fragments did not need to be large to become events. A rain of burning dust lifted into the sky, then began to fall back down. Not my stars. Hers. Dirty, hot, and everywhere. I activated the orbit band. Shield beads circled my wrist. I duplicated them into a blue halo above us. The first burning dust wave hit and shredded half the bubbles. Tessa anchored the rest. Garrett used lightning to knock larger fragments aside. Serena waved the fan again. Black fire curled through the falling dust, turning it into blades. I could not copy all of it. Too many pieces. Too unstable. Too much heat. So I copied the one thing connecting them. The rhythm. Each falling dust blade pulsed with heat from Serena's fan. The pulses came in waves. I touched one fragment that struck my shield and felt the timing. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. I could not copy sound. I could not copy intent. But I could copy the glowing edge as it brightened, and every edge brightened on the same beat. I duplicated one edge at the exact pulse and forced the copy to form late. A delayed edge. Then another. Then another. The falling rhythm broke. Some blades arrived early, some late. They collided in midair, cutting each other apart. Serena's eyes widened. I grinned. She had made an orchestra. I had made it play badly. Garrett charged through the opening. Serena snapped the fan, and a wall of black flame rose before him. I fired the bad idea cannon with a frost bead. The bead copied into a spiral, struck the flame wall, and turned it into steam. Garrett burst through, spear thrusting. Serena folded the fan and caught the spear between two ribs. The stolen flames crawled toward his hands. I copied the decorative ring at the base of the spear tip, the same trick I used in the tournament. But Serena had expected it. She twisted the fan and broke the echo before it formed. Smart. Annoying. She kicked Garrett back and sent a line of black fire toward Owen's rock. That was her mistake. Not because she would hit Owen. Because she made me angry. I touched the resurrection stone in my pouch. Not to use it. To remind myself of the rule. No killing unless there was no other way. Serena wanted me reckless. I would be ridiculous instead. I threw an apple. She burned it instantly. The apple ash drifted in front of her. I copied the ash. 2 clouds. 4. 8. She laughed and sent fire through them. The ash clouds ignited, becoming harmless flash bursts. Harmless to her. Not to visibility. For half a second, she could not see. I touched the ground. The valley floor was full of meteor dust, but I did not copy the dust. I copied the tiny glass beads formed when her own fire melted sand. Hundreds of beads. Small. Simple. No. I made them rise into the air around her, each one holding a reflection of black flame. No enemy copied her moves, no reflection trick. Just glass beads reflecting light into her eyes from every direction. She swung blindly. Garrett hit her fan with the spear shaft, not the blade, knocking it upward. Tessa's baton flashed and pinned the fan's shadow to the ground. The fan itself resisted, shaking, still linked to the stolen flames. I touched the fan's black glass edge. The ring went cold. The fan was too magical to copy whole. But a chip had cracked loose from Garrett's strike. I copied the chip. Then I crushed the duplicate. Echo chains shivered through the fan. One rib cracked. Serena screamed and pulled back, slashing her own palm on the broken edge. Blood hit the meteor dust. The dust flared. The valley answered. Every meteor crater lit up. Serena had accidentally fed the star dust with life force, and the whole valley began to pull downward from the sky. This was no longer her attack. It was a natural starfall, awakened by stolen fire and blood. The environment did not change because of me. It changed because Serena had kicked a sleeping disaster. The clouds opened. Real meteors appeared above us, blue-white and growing brighter. Owen shouted that we needed to run. Tessa said the town was downwind of the valley. If the meteors scattered, the outer farms could be hit. Garrett looked at me. He did not ask if I could stop it. He asked where to stand. That is trust. Terrible, dangerous trust. I held up my cracked meteor shard. The ring chimed, then went silent. I felt every falling star as a line of force in the sky. Too many. Too big. Too real. I could not duplicate them. I could not stop them. But I could create something for them to hit. I touched one safe zone bead. 2, 4, 8. The orbit band caught them and spun them into a halo. I touched the meteor shard. One copied star formed above my palm. I did not launch it downward. I launched it upward. It rose into the falling sky, dragging an echo thread behind it. Then I copied it again. 2 rising stars. 4. 8. Ring burned so hard my arm stopped feeling like my arm. Owen threw stabilizing dust over me. Garrett planted his spear into the ground and poured lightning into the orbit band. Tessa anchored the safe zone halo with her baton. I created a net of rising star copies and blue shield beads above the valley. The first real meteor hit. The sky exploded. The shield halo shattered, but the rising copied stars redirected the impact sideways. The meteor broke into harmless sparks over the eastern cliffs. Second impact. Third. Fourth. Each one nearly tore the ring off my finger. Each one dragged me a little closer to collapse. The duplicated stars were not strong enough to block real meteors, but they could nudge them, split them, confuse their fall. I was not stopping the sky. I was making the sky miss. Serena watched from the ground, bleeding, horrified. Maybe for the first time, she understood the difference between wanting power and carrying it. The largest meteor appeared last. A blue-white stone the size of a tower, falling straight toward the valley center. No shield could stop it. No nudge would be enough. I had one idea left. It was awful, which meant it fit. I touched the empty space beneath the meteor. Not the meteor. The gap. The distance it had to travel. The boundary between sky and earth, defined by the falling path burning with pressure. The ring hesitated. I understood distance now. I had copied steps, gaps, chains, cracks, shadows, and absence. The path of a falling object was a shape made of time. I copied that path. For one heartbeat, a duplicate path appeared beside the real one. The meteor tried to fall down both. It split. Not the stone itself, but its direction. Force divided, and the meteor sheared into 2 burning halves that missed the valley center by miles, crashing into empty mountains beyond the farms. The shockwave threw all of us flat. The sky cleared. Silence dropped over the valley. Then the meteor dust rained down like blue snow. My ring smoked. The orbit band cracked. My glove was gone. My hand hurt so much I started laughing, because pain that big needed a doorway, and laughter was the only one open. Garrett crawled over and smacked my shoulder. He said I had duplicated falling. I said I had duplicated missing. He said that made no sense. I said neither did he, but he was still useful. Tessa walked to Serena, who had not run. Maybe she could not. Maybe she was tired of running. Maybe seeing the sky almost crush everyone had finally burned the hunger out of her for one night. Serena looked at me and said nothing. Tessa cuffed her. This time Serena did not resist. That should have been the final victory. A dangerous enemy stopped. A valley saved. A town protected. A ring mocked at the starter altar, now strong enough to redirect a meteor storm. And for a while it felt complete. When we returned to Flintgate, people saw the blue dust on our clothes and understood enough. They did not need the full story. They had seen the sky flash. They had heard the mountains break. They had watched the farms remain untouched. Nobody cheered at first. They just stood there quiet. Then the little kid from the market raised 2 copper coins in the air. Someone laughed. Someone clapped. Then the whole street erupted. Not the cruel laughter from the altar. This was different. This was relief. Joy. Town realizing it was still alive because a plain silver ring had become the stupidest shield in the world. Owen dragged me to the shop before I could collapse in public. He wrapped my hand, repaired what he could, and yelled the entire time. Tessa stood by the door and pretended not to worry. Garrett sat on the counter until Owen threw a wrench at him. Serena went back to jail under heavier guard and no stolen flames. The violent players she had inspired stayed quiet. For once, nobody tried to steal my ring for an entire week. That was the most suspicious week of my life. I used it to rest, train, and rebuild the orbit band. The new version was stronger, slimmer, and had 3 rotating slots. Owen called them moons. Each moon could hold 1 copied object stable for a short time. I could rotate them with a thought and release combinations faster than before. Moon 1 usually held shield beads. Moon 2 held nails or mandibles. Moon 3 held whatever terrible idea I was pretending not to have. Garrett suggested making Moon 3 always apples. I told him he was finally learning strategy. Tessa suggested making Moon 3 empty unless necessary. I told her she was trying to make me boring. Owen suggested removing Moon 3 entirely. I told him betrayal hurt. Before life could move forward, it tripped over one last problem wearing a smile. It happened on the 8th morning after the meteor storm, when my hand was still wrapped, my ring still smoked if I got too excited, and Owen had officially banned me from touching anything larger than a spoon. Which was insulting. Also reasonable. A group of players came into Flintgate carrying sacks of monster parts and acting like they owned the cobblestones. They were not wearing crowns, they did not wave flags, they did not announce some grand ideology. They were just the worst kind of strong people, the kind who found a safe town full of tired survivors and decided tired people were easy prey. They had learned about Serena being locked away. They had learned about the jail guards being busy with post-meteor repairs. They had learned about me recovering from almost punching a hole in the sky. And worst of all, they had learned about my new orbit band. They did not attack the forge. That would have been stupid. They attacked the supply wagons outside the east gate, where farmers were bringing in grain, healing moss, and cracked blue stones from the meteor dust fields. They used flash powder, smoke charms, and hook chains. Not dungeon monsters, not cursed beasts, just people with weapons and bad ideas. Tessa was on the wall when it started. Garrett was in the dual circle showing off for people who pretended not to be impressed. Owen was halfway through yelling at me for sorting nails too aggressively. Then the alarm bell rang. Owen grabbed his hammer. I grabbed one nail. He looked at me like I had personally disappointed every craftsman in history. I told him I was following medical advice, small objects only. Then I sprinted out the door. By the time I reached the east gate, smoke covered the road, wagons had tipped, grain spilled across the dirt like pale sand, players were coughing and stumbling. One enemy stood on a wagon, laughing while his chain dragged a safe zone crystal crate toward the trees. That crate mattered. Safe zone crystals were not fancy. They did not glow like legendary swords. They did not roar like beast eggs, but after the meteor storm, the outer farms needed them. Without those crystals, monsters would smell fear and weakness and start testing the fields by nightfall. The enemy on the wagon saw me and grinned. He told his group not to kill me too fast. That was generous of him. I stepped into the smoke with one nail pinched between my fingers. The first attacker rushed in from the left. He had a curved blade and enough confidence to be allergic to caution. I touched the nail. 2 nails. 4. 8. The unstable copies flickered like little silver sparks. I did not throw them at his body. Too messy, too easy to call it murder. I threw them at the ground beneath his boots. Each nail duplicated again right before impact. The road turned into a sparkling bed of sudden caltrops. He stepped once, screamed, hopped backward, stepped on 3 more, and collapsed into the smoke while trying to look dignified. That was 1. Another attacker fired a crossbow bolt through the haze. I touched a grain seed from the spilled wagon and flicked it into the bolt's path. 2 sides. 4. 16. They were light, almost weightless, but duplicates did not need weight when they appeared at the right time. The seeds burst into a tiny cloud in front of the bolt. It lost aim by half an inch. Half an inch was enough. The bolt cut my sleeve instead of my throat. I turned the same seed cloud into a whirl, touched it again, and made a curtain of grain between us. Then Garrett arrived like thunder, had gotten bored, and decided to wear boots. He landed beside me with his spear crackling. He said he thought Owen banned me from fighting. I said I was doing agriculture. Garrett looked at the man rolling on the ground with nails in his boots. He said that explained the harvest. The enemy with the chain pulled harder, dragging the safe zone crate toward the woods. 3 more attackers formed around him, and one held a glowing bottle filled with green vapor, poison fog. Cheap, cruel, and effective in a crowded road. Tessa appeared on the wagon roof behind them. No speech. No dramatic pose. Just her baton hitting the bottle before it could open. The bottle flew upward. That was when I got excited. Owen would have hated that. I touched a pebble with my ring and launched it at the bottle. 2 pebbles. 4. 8. The pebbles struck the bottle in a perfect circle, not shattering it, just spinning it faster and faster until the poison vapor inside gathered at the bottom. Then I touched the chain dragging the crystal crate. Not the whole chain. Just 1 link. It became 2 links connected in the same place. The chain jammed. The attacker yanked. The duplicated link could not decide which version was real, so it locked both of them for 1 second. 1 second was all Tessa needed. She kicked the chain loose, rolled off the wagon, and swept the attacker's legs. Garrett followed with the flat side of his spear, sending 2 of his friends into a pile of turnips. I caught the poison bottle as it dropped. My hand stung, the ring buzzed, the green vapor inside pushed against the glass. The enemy leader saw me holding it and shouted that I would not dare copy poison in a safe zone. He was right. I did not copy the poison. I copied the cork. 2 corks became 4, 4 became 8, and every cork appeared jammed into the bottle's mouth at a slightly different angle. The pressure inside had nowhere to go. The bottle inflated like an angry frog. I tossed it straight up. The leader laughed because he thought I had thrown away my only threat. Then I touched a feather from a torn pillow on the wagon seat. 2 feathers. 4. 32. They burst beneath the bottle like a soft white explosion, slowed its fall, and turned the bottle sideways. I copied the cork one more time. Pop. The bottle did not explode over the farmers. It sprayed a thin green line straight across the enemy group's boots. Not enough to kill. Enough to make their legs go numb. All 6 of them fell at once. Garrett stared. Tessa stared. 1 farmer stared. I said I had invented tactical soup seasoning. Nobody laughed except the farmer, who laughed so hard he had to sit down. The leader crawled backwards, still reaching for the crystal crate. He was stubborn. I almost respected that. Then he pulled a black bead from his pouch and crushed it between his teeth. Owen arrived just in time to swear. A shadow wolf came out of the bead. It was not a normal monster. It was condensed from dungeon smoke, all teeth and hunger, with ribs made of darkness. It hit the ground on 4 legs and immediately lunged toward the closest farmer. That changed the mood. Funny was over. I stepped between the wolf and the farmer. My ring was not ready. My hand was not ready. My orbit band had 1 moon loaded with shield beads, 1 moon loaded with nails, and 1 moon loaded with an apple because Garrett was a terrible influence. I released the shield beads. A blue bubble snapped open in front of the farmer. The wolf slammed into it, cracked it, and recoiled. Then it grinned. Monsters should not grin. The enemy leader, still unable to stand, laughed from the ground. He said the bead wolf ate copied objects first. That was useful information. The wolf lunged again. I threw nails. It opened its mouth and swallowed them. The copies fizzed out inside its throat, feeding the shadow in its ribs. Bad. Garrett rushed in, but the wolf twisted around his spear and clawed sparks from his shoulder guard. Tessa struck its side, and her baton passed through smoke. Owen threw a handful of stabilizing dust, but the wolf inhaled it and got brighter. Very bad. The leader laughed harder. He said my trick was useless against something that consumed instability. I hate when villains explain mechanics. I love when they explain mechanics, because now I knew exactly how to beat it. I backed away from the wolf and opened Moon 3. The apple dropped into my palm. Garrett shouted that this was not the time. I told him he had made this everyone's problem. The wolf lunged. I touched the apple. 2 apples. 4. 8. The wolf snapped them out of the air, chewing through the unstable copies in a blur. Its shadow ribs glowed brighter. The leader cheered. I kept backing up. More apples. 16. 32. The wolf devoured them all, growing larger and faster, exactly like it wanted. Owen shouted my name in the tone he used when he thought I had skipped the thinking part and gone straight to the disaster part. I had not. I was counting. Every copied apple lasted about 6 seconds before destabilizing. The wolf ate them in less than 1, but inside its body, the copies did not vanish immediately. They turned into fuel. That meant it had a stomach, or at least a place pretending to be one. So I changed the timing. I touched 1 real apple seed and pressed it into a crack in the road. The wolf ignored that. Of course it did. Seeds are boring until they are not. I copied the apple again and threw both halves high. The wolf jumped, swallowed them, and landed exactly where I wanted. Right over the seed. I touched the seed through the ground. 1 became 2. 2 became 4. 4 became roots. Not real roots, not yet, just unstable copied growth, thin and pale, trying to become a tree inside a single heartbeat. The wolf ate instability. So the roots grew toward the place where instability was strongest. Its stomach. The shadow wolf froze. Its grin disappeared. Pale apple roots burst through the smoke between its ribs, wrapping around the unstable copies it had swallowed. For 1 second, the monster was not a wolf. It was a haunted orchard with teeth. Then I touched the roots. 2 root webs. 4 8. Wolf tried to eat them, but they were already inside the place it used to eat. It snarled and rolled across the road, smashing into the wagon, the crate, and finally the enemy leader. He stopped laughing. That was my favorite sound of the day. Garrett pinned the wolf's shadow tail with lightning. Tessa struck the bead core shining inside its throat. Owen threw a real iron spike through the opening, and I copied the spike at the exact moment it entered the core. 2 spikes occupied the same shadow bead. The bead cracked. The wolf collapsed into black smoke and applesauce. Nobody spoke for a full breath. Then Garrett looked at the mess and said Moon 3 should definitely stay apples. Owen said he was going to melt Moon 3 off the orbit band. Tessa started tying up the attackers. I crouched beside the leader and picked up the broken black bead with a cloth. He glared at me. He said I had no idea who sold him that bead. I said he had no idea how uninterested I was. Then I touched the cloth. 2 cloths. 4. I wrapped the bead fragments in 8 layers, copied a bit of twine, and sealed the whole thing tight. Evidence did not need to be dramatic. Sometimes evidence just needed to not leak smoke. Tessa took the attackers to jail, one limping step at a time. The farmers recovered their goods. The safe zone crate stayed where it belonged. Owen inspected my hand and said the band held better than he expected. I told him that sounded like praise. He said it was a warning with good manners. The attack should have ended there. Of course it did not. That evening while Flintgate repaired the road, the jail bell rang again. Not an alarm. A challenge. The captured leader had made a deal with someone on the outside before he ever attacked the wagons. If he was arrested, a hidden group would open the old glass mine beneath Flintgate and release whatever was sealed inside. No contract. No politics. Just revenge, plain and stupid. The old glass mine was under the North Ridge, sealed because the tunnels reflected sound strangely and drove monsters into frenzies. People said the deeper shafts were full of crystal insects that woke when they heard footsteps. Tessa wanted to evacuate the nearby homes. Owen wanted to collapse the tunnel entrance. Garrett wanted to charge in before the insects could spread. I looked at the cracked black bead in its cloth bundle. Then I looked at the rings. The ring pulsed once. Curious again. I hated that I was starting to understand its moods. We entered the mine before sunset. The first tunnel glittered like frozen water. Every wall caught our torchlight and threw it back in shards. Our footsteps sounded twice as loud, then 4 times, then from directions we had not walked. Garrett whispered that he hated this place. His whisper came back as a chorus. Tessa told everyone to stop talking. The tunnel repeated her words until they sounded like 100 Tessa copies scolding the mountain. I nearly laughed. Then the floor clicked. Thousands of tiny crystal legs moved in the dark ahead. The insects came like spilled jewels, each one the size of my thumb, sharp enough to cut leather, fast enough to crawl over each other in glittering waves. I reached for nails. Owen slapped my wrist. He pointed at the walls. Metal on glass would ring. The sound would wake more. So I used dust. Not magic dust, normal dust from the mine floor. I touched a pinch. 2 pinches. 4. 16. I threw it forward in a soft cloud and copied the cloud as it spread. The dust landed on the insects' crystal legs and dulled their clicking. Their speed dropped. Garrett stepped forward carefully and pressed his spear into the ground, letting lightning crawl through the dust instead of strike. Quiet lightning. I did not know he could do that. He said he learned it from watching me cheat. I said that was called education. He moved deeper, leaving the insects stunned but alive. I was not here to massacre a mine full of angry jewelry. I was here to stop whoever had opened the seal. We found them in the central chamber. 3 players stood around a glass pillar with a black chain wrapped around it. No names worth remembering, no grand speeches worth keeping. It had already cracked the seal, and inside the pillar floated a creature made of pale crystal plates folded around a burning red heart. The players saw us and panicked. One tried to finish breaking the pillar. Tessa threw her baton and knocked his hand away. Another swung a hammer at the chain. Garrett shocked the hammer so hard it jumped out of his grip. The third pulled out another black bead. I threw an apple at his face. It was a real apple. Sometimes the classic methods work. He dropped the bead. Unfortunately, the bead rolled into the cracked seal. The red heart inside the pillar opened like an eye. The mine screamed. Every wall sang, every crystal insect in every tunnel woke at once. The glass pillar split from top to bottom, and the folded creature unfolded into something tall, thin, and beautiful in the most dangerous way. Its arms were blades. Its body was stained glass. Its heart beat once, and the sound cut a line across my cheek. Owen said not to let it make sound. That was easy advice to understand and impossible advice to follow. The creature lifted one blade arm and tapped the floor. A clear note rang out. The chamber answered with a storm of echoes. Crystal insects poured through every opening. The three criminals tried to run and immediately slipped on dust, proving my earlier work was still useful. Tessa dragged two of them behind a stone outcrop. Garrett kicked the third after them without looking. The crystal creature turned toward me. It could sense instability. Of course it could. Everything awful eventually noticed my ring. I opened Moon 1 and released shield beads in a circle. The creature tapped the floor again, and the sound sliced 3 shields into blue mist. Not good. I opened Moon 2, then stopped. Nails would ring. Spikes would ring. Coins would ring. Almost everything I loved would make noise here. So I reached into my pouch and pulled out the quietest thing I owned. A strip of cloth. Owen looked at me. He smiled. That was terrifying. I touched the cloth. 2 strips. 4. 8. I threw them into the air, and the ring copied their motion instead of their weight. The strips fluttered around the chamber, soft and silent, landing on glass walls, crystal edges, insect legs, and broken pillar shards. Then I touched one more strip and doubled it again. 16. 32. The chamber filled with falling cloth, like a very confused laundry storm. The creature tapped the floor. The note died. No echo. The cloth had covered enough hard surfaces to swallow the sound. The creature paused. I loved that pause. That pause meant a boss had just realized the arena was no longer on its side. Garrett moved first, sliding under the blade arm and striking the creature's knee with the wooden shaft of his spear instead of the metal tip. Tessa followed, using rope instead of her baton, looping the creature's wrist and pulling it off balance. Owen threw stabilizing paste at the red heart. The paste stuck. I touched the paste while it was midair. 2 patches. 4. 8. The heart became covered in dull gray handprints of magic glue. Its glow dimmed. The insect slowed. The creature lifted both arms and tried to scrape the paste away. I copied the cloth under its feet. The floor became soft. It slipped. The glass boss, sealed for who knew how long, nearly ended Flintgate because of revenge, and I defeated its balance with laundry. That was the kind of legacy I could live with. But it was not finished. The red heart pulsed harder, burning through the paste. The cloth around the chamber started smoking. The insects shook off the dust. The creature opened its chest, and I saw the black bead lodged beside its heart like a splinter. The bead was amplifying it. If we broke the heart, the mind might collapse. If we left the bead, the creature would scream again. So I had to remove one tiny object from inside a moving crystal monster without touching the heart, without making sound, and without getting chopped into recap-friendly pieces. Naturally, I had an idea. It was stupid. I loved it immediately. I took one monster tooth from my pouch, tiny, curved, sharp. Owen saw it and mouthed no. I nodded yes. Then I wrapped the tooth in cloth and touched the cloth. 2 wrapped teeth. 4. 8. Quiet blades. I flicked them in a circle around the creature's open chest. They did not strike. They orbited, soft cloth outside, hard tooth inside, waiting for the pulse. The red heart beat. The black bead shifted. I touched the gap between bead and heart. A tiny space. A tiny absence. I had copied distance before with meteors, but this was smaller, sharper, more delicate. The ring trembled, unsure if it should obey. I breathed once. Then I doubled the gap. The bead popped loose by the width of a fingernail. That was enough. The wrapped teeth snapped inward, hooked the bead, and yanked it out without scratching the heart. I caught it in a copied cloth pouch. The creature froze. The red heart slowed. The insects stopped. For one quiet second, the chamber looked peaceful. Then the creature collapsed into a pile of harmless crystal plates with a sound like ice cubes settling in a glass. Garrett pointed at me and said I had just performed surgery with monster teeth and laundry. I said I preferred the term advanced crafting. Owen said he preferred the term panic with accessories. Tessa tied up the 3 criminals and looked at the silent mine around us. She said jail was getting crowded. I told her we could duplicate the cells. She stared at me. I said I was joking. Mostly. We hauled the criminals back to Flintgate, along with the wrapped black beads and a cart full of harmless crystal plates. Owen kept some plates for crafting. Garrett wanted one as a trophy. Tessa wanted every bead locked away. I wanted a nap. Instead, the town was waiting. Not cheering this time. Watching. The farmers from the morning stood beside the guards. The market kid held 2 coins again. Players who had laughed at me weeks ago stood near the fountain, staring at the safe zone crate we had saved, and the glass mine criminals now tied together with coppered rope. One of the old weapon users lowered his legendary sword when I passed. Not in defeat. In respect. That felt stranger than applause. Leader from the road attack was dragged out just long enough to see his backup plan had failed. His face went pale when Tessa placed the black beads in a sealed box. He asked, "Oh." I held up one strip of dirty cloth. He looked confused. That was enough punishment for the moment. Tessa took him back inside. Owen took the crystal plates to his forge. Garrett followed because he wanted to argue about apple-based combat doctrine. I sat on the fountain edge and unwrapped my hand. The skin under the bandage was burned in a thin circle where the ring rested. Not badly, not permanently, but enough to remind me that every flashy trick had a cost. Every duplicate came with instability. Every clever answer pushed the ring further, and every time the ring learned something new, it asked me a question without words. What else can you copy? A coin, a key, a shade, a shield, a pass, a gap, a mistake. I looked at the jail where evil people were learning that attacking me was the fastest way to lose their weapons, their plans, their dignity, and occasionally their balance. Then I looked at the forge where Owen was already turning enemy disasters into upgrades. Then I looked at Garrett, who was explaining to a confused crowd that apples were now a recognized combat tool. Then I looked at Tessa, who was pretending not to smile while writing names on arrest tags. I had climbed higher than the people who mocked me at the altar, but it did not feel like standing above them. It felt like standing in front of a door I had not opened yet. And my entire life had become very simple. When I found a locked door, I made another key. When I found a wall, I made another pass. When I found an enemy who thought power only meant damage, I made another lesson. That night, Owen finished repairing the orbit band again. Moon 3 stayed. Against Owen's wishes, it even got a tiny apple mark carved into the side. He said the mark was temporary. I said legacy was never temporary. He threw a rag at me. I copied it before it hit my face. 2 rags slapped me at once. Garrett laughed so hard he almost fell into the cooling barrel. Tessa walked in, saw me holding both rags, and asked if I had learned anything. I said yes. Never duplicate incoming laundry. She said that was the first sensible thing I had said all week. For the first time since the meteor storm, the forge felt light again. Warm. Alive. Like maybe Flintgate could keep breathing. Like maybe I could too. Life moved forward. New dungeons opened. New players arrived at the starter altar. They chose swords, staffs, armor, and beast eggs just like before. Sometimes I watched from a distance as they laughed at plain relics and grabbed whatever looked strongest. I never stopped them. People have to make their own mistakes. But once I saw a nervous player reach for a cracked wooden spoon sitting in a forgotten bowl at the altar's edge. Others snickered. The spoon had no attack power, no defense, unknown function. The player looked like they might put it back. I stepped beside them and held up my ring. I said unknown was not the same as useless. They took the spoon. I still do not know what it does. I hope it is ridiculous. A few nights after the Starfall Valley incident, I went alone to the hill above Flintgate. The safe zone crystal glowed below, steady and blue. The town lights flickered. Owen's forge smoked. Garrett trained in the empty dual circle, probably pretending not to enjoy being watched by fans. Tessa walked the wall, baton at her side. I took out the cracked meteor shard. It had changed again. The crack no longer looked like damage. It looked like a doorway filled with tiny moving stars. The ring pulsed softly. Not hot, not cold, not silent. Curious. I touched the shard. No copy appeared. Instead, the stars inside the crack shifted, forming a shape. A map. Not of Flintgate. Not of Starfall. Far beyond the known regions, past the mountains where the split meteor had landed, past a dark sea drawn in silver lines, there was an island marked by a falling ring of light. At the center of that island was a symbol I recognized. A plain circle, like my rings. Then the shard flickered and the map vanished. I sat there for a long time, listening to the town below, feeling the ring rest quietly on my finger. At the starter altar, everyone picked legendary weapons. I picked the plain silver ring that doubled whatever I touched. They laughed because it had no attack power. They were right. It never needed attack power. It had coins that became storms, seeds that became jungles, keys that became openings, stones that became shields, sparks that became lightning traps, resurrection echoes that pulled people back from the edge. Meteor shards that turned the sky into my ammunition. But the map inside the shard told me something I could not ignore. My ring was not finished teaching me. And somewhere beyond the dark sea, something with the same symbol was waiting. I slipped the shard back into my pouch, stood up, and looked at the stars. Then I smiled. Because if the world was going to hand me one mystery, I already knew what I would do with it. I would touch it. And make it too.